Please don't hurt him." Clara's voice cracked through the silence like a gunshot. She stepped forward on her damaged leg, trembling, facing the most feared man in Chicago, Adrian Moretti, who had just pressed a knife to a young man's throat. The entire room froze. Nobody moved against Adrian Moretti. Nobody. But Clara Bennett just did. If this story already has your heart pounding, you're exactly where you need to be. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss a story, and drop a comment below telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Clara Bennett had learned a long time ago that pain was not the enemy. The real enemy was silence. The silence of a hospital room at 2 in the morning, when the doctors stopped making promises and started choosing their words very carefully. The silence of her younger brother Ethan, sitting in a plastic chair outside her room, 16 years old, and trying to hold his face together because he thought she needed him to be strong. The silence inside her own chest when she understood for the first time that nothing would ever go back to the way it was before. 4 years had passed since the accident. 4 years since a man who ran a red light at 60 miles an hour had turned her life into something she barely recognized. The driver walked away with a broken wrist and a suspended license. Clara walked away with a fractured lumbar vertebra, a shattered right hip, and a prognosis that the doctors delivered with the careful tone of people who had given up hope but did not want to say it directly. "You'll regain significant function," the lead surgeon told her, "but full recovery is unlikely. The nerve damage is substantial." Clara had stared at the ceiling above her hospital bed and translated those words into plain English inside her own mind. "You will never run again. You will probably always limp. Some mornings you will wake up and the pain will be so deep in your hip and lower back that you will not be able to stand for 20 minutes. You will take medication for the rest of your life, just to function at a level that most people take completely for granted." She had cried for exactly 2 days. Then she had stopped. Because Ethan needed groceries, because the rent was 3 weeks overdue, because the insurance settlement after the lawyer took his cut and the hospital took theirs had left her with enough money to survive for approximately 4 months. Because their mother had been gone since Ethan was 9, and their father had never been a real option, and because the simple truth was that nobody was coming to rescue them. So Clara rescued herself. She fought through physical therapy with a stubbornness that surprised every therapist who worked with her. She relearned how to walk with the kind of grim determination that had nothing romantic or heroic about it. It was just necessity, raw and practical. She developed a compensating gait that minimized her limp when she concentrated, though by the end of every shift, her right side ached so deeply that she sometimes had to grip the wall of a bathroom stall and breathe through her teeth for a full minute before she could continue working. She found the night cleaning job through a bulletin board posting at the physical therapy clinic. $14 an hour, 9 at night to 4 in the morning, cleaning offices in the financial district. The pay was modest. The hours were brutal. But the job required almost no standing in one place. It was constant movement, which her physical therapist had told her was actually better for her hip than static standing. And the supervisor, a heavy-set woman named Dolores, who smelled like cigarettes and peppermint candy, had seen something in Clara during the interview and decided not to ask too many questions about why a 26-year-old woman was applying for graveyard shift janitorial work. "You show up on time and you don't steal from the break rooms," Dolores had said, "and we don't have problems." Clara had shown up on time every single shift for 2 years. She and Ethan shared a 1-bedroom apartment on the northwest side of Chicago, which meant Ethan slept on the pull-out couch, and Clara took the bedroom. Not because she wanted more space, but because her body demanded a proper mattress with a specific firmness that kept her spine from seizing up overnight. Ethan never complained. He was 20 years old now and attending community college during the day, working part-time at a hardware store on weekends, and trying to build something out of nothing the same way Clara was. They were careful with each other. They'd learned how to move around each other's pain without touching it directly. Ethan never asked how much her medication cost. Clara never asked what he really wanted to study in college, because she already knew it was music, and she already knew that music was not something they could afford to dream about right now. They loved each other the way people love each other when survival is the primary activity, fiercely and practically, and with very little time for sentimentality. On a Tuesday night in November, Clara arrived at her second building of the shift at 11:15. The Harrington Tower was a 40-story financial building in the River North District, one of 4 buildings on her route. She came in through the service entrance on the lower level, the way she always did, badge swiping through the freight elevator and pulling her cart to the east corridor of the 14th floor. The building was supposed to be empty. It was always empty by 11. But tonight, there was light coming from under a door at the end of the corridor. Not the pale blue of computer screens left on overnight, something warmer. Something intentional. Clara hesitated. The professional thing was to skip that room and keep moving. She had 6 more floors on her route and 4 hours until her shift ended. She had learned in 2 years on this job that the first rule of night cleaning was invisibility. You were not supposed to notice things. You were not supposed to be curious. You came in, you cleaned, you left. But the sound coming from behind that door made her stop completely. Not a conversation, not a phone call. A sound she recognized from somewhere very deep in her memory. A sound that a person made when they were afraid. Clara stood very still in the hallway and listened. She told herself she was imagining it. She told herself it was the building settling, or a television left on, or her own overworked mind filling silence with things that weren't there. Then she heard words. "I told you I don't have it. I swear to God I don't have it. Please, please just let me." And another voice, very quiet, very flat, the way certain types of dangerous men speak when they want you to understand that they have absolutely nothing left to prove. "You had 3 days, Marcus. 3 days was already a kindness." Clara's hand was on her cart. She was 20 feet from the stairwell. She could turn around right now. She could go back down to the service level, tell Dolores the 14th floor was already clean, move on, and never think about this room again. Her right hip was throbbing. It always got worse after midnight. She turned toward the door instead. She told herself later that she didn't make a conscious decision, that her body moved before her mind could catch up, that something older and more fundamental than logic took over some part of her that had spent 4 years watching helplessness from the inside and had simply run out of patience for it. She pushed open the door. The room was a conference room. Long table, leather chairs, a wall of windows looking out over the river. 3 men stood at the far end of the table. One of them was young, maybe 22, with his shirt torn at the collar and his hands pressed flat on the tabletop to keep them from shaking. He had a split lip and a dark bruise spreading under his left eye. The second man was large and expressionless, positioned slightly behind and to the right of the third, the way security personnel positioned themselves. And the third man. Clara had never seen Adrian Moretti in person, but she knew his face. Everyone in Chicago knew his face, even if they weren't the kind of people who moved in his circles. You saw it in newspaper photographs, in the background of political fundraising events, in the society pages of publications that reported on wealthy men with interesting connections. He was 38, dark-haired, with the kind of face that would have been handsome in a simple life, and was instead something harder angles sharpened by authority eyes trained to reveal nothing. He was standing very calmly on the other side of the young man. His jacket was off. His sleeves were rolled to the elbow. He was holding a folded piece of paper which he set down on the table with the precise, unhurried movement of a man who had never once in his adult life needed to rush anything. All 3 of them looked at Clara. The silence lasted about 4 seconds. It felt like standing at the edge of something very high. "Please," Clara said. Her voice surprised her. It came out steadier than she felt. "Please don't hurt him." Nobody moved. The large man behind Adrian shifted his weight slightly, and that small motion told Clara everything she needed to know about how badly this could go for her. But she had already stepped through the door. There was no direction to go that wasn't forward. Adrian Moretti looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the cleaning cart she'd left in the hallway. Then he looked back at her. "Who are you?" he said. "Nobody," Clara said. "I clean this building." "Then you should go clean something else." "I heard him asking you not to hurt him." Another silence. The young man Marcus was staring at Clara with an expression she couldn't read, something between desperate hope and genuine terror on her behalf. "You heard that," Adrian said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes. And you came in anyway." "Yes." Adrian tilted his head slightly. It was a small motion, barely perceptible, but the large man beside him went completely still, which Clara understood to mean that Adrian had signaled something. "Do you know who I am?" Adrian asked. The honest answer was yes. The smart answer was no. Clara understood in that moment that she was well past the point where smart answers were available to her. "Yes," she said. Something changed in his expression. It was so brief she almost missed it, a flicker of something that was not irritation, not amusement, but something genuinely unexpected. Something that looked in the most unlikely way, like surprise. "Then why are you still standing there?" Clara heard the answer come out of her mouth before she'd decided to say it. "Because someone has to." The room was completely silent. Marcus had stopped breathing. The large man was watching Adrian. Adrian was watching Clara with an expression she could not name, and had never seen on the face of anyone with that kind of power, because it was the expression of a man who had just encountered something he did not have a category for. After a moment that stretched long enough to feel physical, Adrian turned to the large man and said something in a very low voice. The large man nodded and stepped back. Then Adrian looked at Marcus. "Go," he said. "We'll finish this conversation later." Marcus looked at Clara. He looked at Adrian. He grabbed his jacket from the back of a chair and walked quickly toward the door, giving Clara a wide berth, not making eye contact with anyone. His footsteps disappeared down the hallway. Adrian straightened his cuffs. He picked up his jacket from the chair where he'd folded it and put it back on with the unhurried precision of someone who had never once dressed carelessly in his life. He looked at Clara again. "You're going to tell me your name," he said. It was not a question. It was also not a threat exactly. It was something in between the statement of a man accustomed to knowing things. "Clara Bennett." "How long have you worked here, Clara Bennett?" 2 years. "And in 2 years, you've never seen anything you weren't supposed to see." "I've seen things," Clara said. "I've never walked into them before." "Why tonight?" She didn't have a clean answer for that. She'd been asking herself the same question in real time since the moment her hand pushed open the door. "He sounded scared," she finally said. "I know what that sounds like." Something in Adrian's face shifted again. It wasn't softening exactly. There was nothing soft about this man, but something in the careful armor of his expression developed an almost imperceptible crack. He looked at her leg. Not rudely, a brief clinical observation, the way a doctor might look noticing the way she was distributing her weight. "You're in pain," he said. The directness of it surprised her. "My shift ends at 4. "That wasn't what I asked." "I know." He looked at her for another long moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and produced a card matte black, embossed a phone number and nothing else, and set it on the edge of the conference table. "For emergencies," he said. "I don't need... Take it anyway." He picked up the folded paper from the table and moved toward the door. His large companion fell into step behind him. At the doorway he paused without turning. "Go home after your shift." "Clara Bennett," he said. "Directly home." Then he was gone. Clara stood in the empty conference room for a long time. Her hip was screaming. Her hands, she noticed, were shaking. She looked at the card on the table. She looked at the door. She picked up the card. She told herself it was just so she had it, that it meant nothing, that she would throw it away when she got home. She put it in her pocket. She didn't throw it away. 3 days passed, then 4. She carried the card in the pocket of her work pants and told herself she was going to throw it away every morning. And every morning something stopped her. On the 5th day, Ethan came home from work with a bruise on his face. Clara was at the kitchen table when he came in drinking tea and going through the month's bills with the particular focused dread that had become her ritual. She heard the door. She heard him try to come in quietly, the way he did when he didn't want her to look at him. She looked at him. What happened? It was nothing. He went to the refrigerator, kept his back to her. Ethan. Clara, it was nothing. There was a situation at work, it's handled. She waited. With Ethan, waiting was always more effective than pushing. He had her stubbornness, but not her directness, and if you gave him enough silence, he would eventually fill it. He put down the orange juice and turned around. The bruise started at his cheekbone and ended somewhere under his jaw. His lip was slightly swollen on the left side. He had been in a physical altercation with more than one person, and Clara understood this the way you understood things about someone you'd raised. A situation at work, she said. There are guys who come around the hardware store. They've been asking Danny, he's the assistant manager. They've been asking him about protection money. Danny told them no last week. Today they came back with a different answer. Clara set down her pen. Did they hurt Danny? Danny wasn't there. I was. Ethan paused. I told them he wasn't there. They told me to make sure he got their message. I said some things maybe I shouldn't have said. Ethan, I'm fine. You have a bruise the size of my hand on your face. I'm fine, Clara. She looked at him for a long moment. He looked back at her with the particular expression that meant he was using every resource he had to appear calm, which he had learned from watching her do it for 4 years. She reached into her pocket. She set the card on the kitchen table. Ethan looked at it. He looked at her. What is that? I don't know yet, she said. Whose number is that? She picked it up again. She put it back in her pocket. I need to think, she said. She thought about it for another 2 days. She thought about Ethan's bruise and the way it was already yellowing at the edges. She thought about Danny, the assistant manager, and the other people who worked at that hardware store. She thought about what protection money meant in practical terms. What happened when people stopped paying it? What happened when people didn't have someone to call? She thought about Marcus in the conference room and the way his hands had been pressing flat against the table to keep them still. She thought about Adrian Moretti, who had looked at her the way no powerful man had ever looked at her, not through her, not past her, but directly at her, with an attention that felt dangerous for reasons she couldn't entirely explain. On the 7th day, she called the number. It rang twice. Clara Bennett, said a voice that she recognized immediately. She closed her eyes. How did you know it was me? I have very few people with access to that number, Adrian said, and none of them would call at 7 in the morning. I need to ask you something. All right? If a business, a small business, a hardware store, if they're being pressured for protection money, is there something that can be done about that? A pause, shorter than she expected. Who runs the business? His name is Danny Cho. It's in the Portage Park neighborhood. And why are you calling me about a hardware store in Portage Park? Because my brother works there, Clara said. And because they hurt him. The silence on the other end lasted approximately 4 seconds. She had the sense that Adrian Moretti did not often experience 4 seconds of silence. I'll look into it, he said. I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. I didn't say I would. I'm not asking for anything more than information. Just if there's someone they should talk to or a situation that can be resolved. Clara. She stopped. I said I'll look into it. She realized she'd been gripping the phone too tightly. She loosened her hand. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm not thanking you for the result. I'm thanking you for listening. Another brief silence. Nobody thanks me for listening, he said. Maybe nobody ever does it, she said. She ended the call. For 3 days after that phone call, nothing happened. Then Danny Cho called her brother and told him the men hadn't come back. He didn't know why. He didn't ask. He told Ethan they were giving everyone a small raise at the end of the month. Ethan told Clara about it over dinner that Friday. He watched her face as he talked. Did you do something? He asked. I made a phone call. Ethan looked at the table. He looked at her. Clara. Who did you call? Someone with resources. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have right now. Ethan was quiet for a moment. He was not. Clara reflected the kind of person who accepted incomplete information easily. He'd gotten that from her too. Are you safe? He asked. Yes. Are you sure? She thought about Adrian Moretti in the conference room. She thought about the card in her pocket and the silence on the phone and the way he'd said her name when she called. I'm being careful, she said, which was not the same as yes, but it was the truest thing she had. 2 weeks after the phone call, Clara arrived at the Harrington Tower on a Tuesday night to find a different kind of silence. Not the empty silence of a building after hours. Something tighter, more intentional. She noticed it in the service elevator, the way the attendant, a man who'd ignored her for 2 years, suddenly avoided her eyes. She noticed it in the 14th floor corridor, where the overhead lights had been replaced with something slightly different. A warmer bulb she realized that she had not requested, and that had not been there last week. She was pushing her cart down the east corridor when she heard the conference room door open behind her. She didn't turn around. You kept the card, Adrian said. You changed the light bulbs on my floor, she said. A pause. The fluorescent lights in this building aggravate migraines. I own the building. I can change the lights. Clara stopped her cart. She turned around. Adrian Moretti was standing in the doorway of the conference room, his jacket off, holding 2 cups of coffee. He looked, she thought, almost human, like this sleeves rolled again. No performance of authority, just a man in a hallway with 2 cups of coffee at 11:30 at night. You own this building, she said. I own several buildings. And yet you're here at 11:30 on a Tuesday. I work late. Doing what? He held out one of the cups. She looked at it. She looked at him. She thought about every reasonable reason to walk away, and she walked toward him instead. She took the cup. The coffee was good, not from a machine. Real coffee with the kind of depth that came from beans that cost more than she made in an hour. The hardware store situation is handled, he said. Permanently. I gathered. You're not going to thank me. I thanked you for listening. You didn't want more than that. Something in his expression shifted. That same flicker she'd seen in the conference room, the look of a man encountering something he didn't have a file for. Sit down, Clara. I'm on shift. The building will still be dirty in 20 minutes. She looked at him for a moment. Then she pulled a chair from the conference room and sat down. He sat across from her. He put his coffee on the table and looked at her with the same directness he'd used since the night she walked through that door, not the evaluating look of a powerful man deciding what someone was worth, but something more unsettling, an attention that felt like it was trying to understand something. How did you get hurt? He asked. Clara's hand tightened on the cup. That's a personal question. I know. You don't have the right to ask personal questions. I know that too. He didn't look away. You don't have to answer it. She looked at her coffee. She thought about 4 years in a hospital ceiling, and Ethan in a plastic chair, and the sound of doctors choosing their words carefully. Car accident, she said. 4 years ago, I was walking home from a bus stop, and a driver ran a red light. He hit you. He hit me. What happened to him? Suspended license, community service. She kept her voice flat and informational. He wrote me a letter of apology. It was 3 paragraphs. Adrian was quiet. She looked up and found him watching her with an expression that was too complicated to categorize quickly. What did you do with the letter? He asked. I kept it. She paused. I don't know why. It didn't help, but throwing it away felt like pretending it didn't happen. And the medical bills. What about them? The accident left you with medical bills, he said. It was not a question. Which is why you work nights cleaning offices. Clara set down her coffee. I don't need your money, Adrian. His name came out before she'd decided to use it. She watched something change in his face at the sound of it. I didn't offer you money, he said. You're thinking about it. A beat. I was thinking about it, he admitted. Don't. Why not? Because I made a choice, Clara said. I walked through that door, and I made a phone call, and both of those things I chose to do. I didn't do them to put myself in debt to you. I don't owe you gratitude, and you don't owe me compensation. We're even. Nobody's ever told me we're even before. Nobody's ever meant it, she said. I mean it. He looked at her for a long time. The building settled around them in its nighttime way. The hum of HVAC systems, the distant sound of traffic. 40 floors below, the particular quality of silence that comes from being somewhere large and mostly empty. Tell me something, he said. What? Why did you really walk through that door? I told you, he sounded scared. Lots of people sound scared. You hear it constantly in your line of work in your neighborhood on the bus going home. You don't walk through every door. Clara thought about it honestly. I know what it sounds like when someone has no one, she said. I've sounded like that. I didn't want him to be alone in it. Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. He owed me money he'd been stealing from me for 8 months. I know. You didn't know that when you walked through the door? No. So you stepped between me and a man whose actual situation you had no way of evaluating. Yes. That's not courage, he said. That's something closer to reckless. Probably, Clara agreed. I didn't say it was smart. I said someone had to. Something in his expression moved. Not a smile. She didn't think this man smiled the way normal people smiled, but something that lived in the same neighborhood, a loosening somewhere behind the eyes. Someone had to, he repeated softly. That's what I said. He picked up his coffee. He looked at the window. Outside Chicago stretched in all directions, lit and vast and complicated. I used to believe that, he said. A long time ago. That someone had to do things because nobody else would. He paused. I'm not sure when I stopped. Clara watched him. What happened? He looked at her. Power happened. He said simply. It was the most honest thing she had ever heard from a man in that position, and she understood in that moment that it had cost him something to say it. She picked up her coffee. What were you like before? She asked. He was quiet for a long moment. Angry, he said, and young, which are mostly the same thing. He paused. I grew up in a neighborhood that was already half gone by the time I was 12. No services, no protection, nothing that worked the way it was supposed to. He turned the cup in his hands. So I decided I would make things work, on my own terms. And this is your own terms, Clara said. This is what my terms became. She thought about that. Do you hate it? No. He was certain about that. But I think... He stopped. What? I think I've lost the ability to tell the difference between protecting something and controlling it. He said it quietly to the window. Those used to feel different. Clara looked at him for a long time. They still feel different, she said. You just have to remember which one you were trying to do in the first place. He looked at her. She held his gaze. After a moment, she stood up. My shift, she said. Right. She picked up her cart. Clara? She paused. Tomorrow night, he said. I'll be here again. She didn't answer that. She pushed her cart down the corridor. But she was already thinking about whether her hip would be manageable enough by tomorrow night for her to stay and drink coffee for more than 20 minutes. It occurred to her walking toward the elevator that she had just had the most honest conversation she'd had with another adult in approximately 3 years. It also occurred to her that the man she'd had it with was the most dangerous person she'd ever encountered. She wasn't sure what to do with either of those facts. She got in the elevator. She pressed the button for the next floor. The doors closed, and in the silence of the elevator, Clara Bennett stood with her bad hip and her cart full of cleaning supplies and an empty coffee cup and felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Not safe. Not safe exactly, but seen, and she didn't know yet whether that was better or worse. She came back the next night. She told herself it was just because it was her regular route. The 14th floor was on her schedule. She wasn't coming back for any other reason. Adrian was already there, 2 cups of coffee on the conference room table. The door open, his jacket folded over the back of a chair. She parked her cart. She sat down. "You came back," he said. "It's my regular route." "Of course." He didn't argue it. They drank their coffee in silence for a moment. "Tell me something about your brother," he said. The request surprised her. "Why?" "Because you mentioned him and then moved on, and I want to understand what you're protecting." Clara turned the cup in her hands. "Ethan is 20 years old," she said. "He's smarter than he knows he is. He wants to study music, but he thinks we can't afford for him to want that, so he studies business instead." "Does he know you know?" "He thinks I don't know." She paused. "He plays guitar when he thinks I'm asleep. He's very good. He learned from YouTube videos at the library." Adrian was quiet. "He's the reason I get out of bed on the bad days," Clara said. "Not in the way you might think, not like I'm sacrificing myself for him. More like he's proof that something we're doing is working. Every time I see him, I think we're still here. We're still going." She paused. "That's enough." "Is it?" She looked at him. "What do you mean? Is enough really enough for you, or is it just what you tell yourself?" The question hit harder than she expected. She was quiet for a moment. "That's a very direct question," she said. "You answer direct questions honestly. I noticed." She looked at the table. "Some days it's genuinely enough," she said. "Some days it's a lie I tell myself so I can get dressed." She paused. "Both of those things are true at the same time." Adrian leaned forward slightly. "What do you want, Clara?" "Not what you need. What do you want?" Nobody asked her that. Nobody had asked her that in 4 years. The question felt strange and a little dangerous, like standing near an open window. "I want my leg to stop hurting," she said. "I want Ethan to be able to study what he actually loves. I want—" She stopped. "Go on." "I want to feel like a person and not a problem someone has to solve." The room went quiet. Adrian looked at her with an expression she had no name for. "You've never felt like a problem to me," he said. "You've known me for 12 days. 10. And I'm not speaking about myself." "Then who?" He paused. "Everyone else in your life who made you feel that way." Clara looked at him. He held her gaze without flinching. "You're strange," she said, "for what you are. Most people think I'm exactly what you'd expect. Most people don't drink coffee with you in empty buildings at midnight." Something happened in his face. That almost smile again. Closer this time. "No," he said. "They don't." The building settled around them. Traffic sounds far below. The hum of the ventilation. "Adrian," she said. "Yes." "What happened with Marcus?" The near smile left his face. Not entirely, something residual of it remained, but the openness pulled back slightly the way a flame pulls back when the draft changes. "He repaid his debt," Adrian said. "In full. In a way that satisfied me." "Did you hurt him?" A pause. "No." She studied him. "Would you have, if I hadn't walked through that door?" A longer pause this time. "I would have scared him badly enough that he never thought about stealing from me again," Adrian said. "Whether that crossed into something you'd call hurt, it's a question of degree." "That's an honest answer." "You respond better to honest answers." "Everyone responds better to honest answers," Clara said. "They're just not used to getting them." He looked at her. "You say things that sound simple and aren't. You notice things that other people overlook," she said. "So we're even on the strange." He was quiet for a moment. "Come back tomorrow," he said. Clara stood up and picked up her cart. "My schedule says I'm on this floor tomorrow," she said. "Good." She walked to the elevator. She didn't look back, but she was already counting the hours. She came back every night that week. She told herself it was the route. She told herself it was the coffee, which was genuinely better than anything she could afford on her salary. She told herself a lot of things on the elevator ride up to the 14th floor. And by Thursday, she had stopped bothering because the truth was simple and she was too tired at the end of her shifts to maintain comfortable fictions. She came back because of the way he listened. Adrian Moretti listened the way people listened before the world taught them that listening was a transaction, before they learned to hold information in reserve, to wait for their turn to file away what you said for later use. He listened as if the only thing happening in the room was what you were telling him, as if time had agreed to pause while you spoke. Clara had not experienced that since before the accident. Possibly before that. On Thursday night, she arrived at the 14th floor to find the conference room door open and Adrian standing at the window with his phone in his hand mid-conversation. He glanced at her when she appeared in the doorway. He said into the phone, "I'll call you back," and ended the call before the other person could respond. "That sounded important," Clara said. "It wasn't. You don't have to hang up for me." "I know." He set the phone face down on the table. "Sit down." She sat. He brought the coffee. She had stopped remarking on the quality of it because remarking made it feel like an event and she preferred it to feel ordinary. "You're moving differently tonight," he said. "What do you mean?" "Your right side. You're compensating more than usual." Clara looked at him. "You've been watching how I walk." "You've been watching how I speak," he said. "We're paying attention to each other. That's what this is." She didn't have an argument for that. She looked at her coffee. "Bad day," she said. "The cold makes it worse. The hip joint doesn't like temperatures under 40 degrees. It's 31 outside." "I know. And you walked here from the bus stop." "I always walk from the bus stop." "How far?" 6 blocks. He said nothing. But he was quiet in the particular way he was quiet when something she said was bothering him. She had learned in the space of a week to read those silences. They were more expressive than most people's words. "Don't," she said. "Don't what?" "Whatever you're thinking about arranging, don't." He picked up his coffee. "I was thinking about the weather." "You were thinking about my transportation options." He was quiet again. "Adrian?" She waited until he looked at her. "I walked 6 blocks in 31-degree weather with a bad hip because that is my life. It's not a problem you need to solve. If you try to solve it, I'll stop coming up here." He met her eyes. "That's a significant threat." "It's a real one." Another silence. Then, "All right." "Thank you." He turned his cup in his hands. She'd noticed he did that when he was thinking, turning the cup, not drinking from it, just rotating it slowly between his palms, as if the motion helped something inside him organize. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You've asked me a lot of things." "One more. Ask." "Do you ever get angry?" Clara looked at him. "About what specifically?" "All of it. The accident, the bills, the leg, cleaning offices at midnight when you should be—" He stopped. "When I should be what?" He looked at her directly. "When you should be doing something that uses what you actually are." The sentence landed somewhere in her chest. She looked at the table. "Every person in this situation asks themselves that question," Adrian said. "What they could have been, what they would have chosen, what they lost when they lost the thing they lost." "How do you know?" "Because I used to be in a situation," he said. "A different kind. But the anger is the same." Clara was quiet for a moment. "Yes," she said. "I get angry." "At who?" "At the driver. At the insurance company that made me fight for 2 years for a settlement that didn't cover half of what I needed. At the doctors who said unlikely when they meant impossible and thought they were being kind." She paused. "At myself sometimes." "For what?" "For not being angrier sooner. For spending so much energy being graceful about it." She looked at him. "Graceful is exhausting." Something moved in his face. "Yes," he said quietly. "It is." She looked at him. "What are you graceful about?" He turned the cup. "Everything," he said. "I'm graceful about everything. I'm perfectly controlled at all times. I never raise my voice. I never react. I never show anyone what actually happens inside." He paused. "Do you know what that costs?" "I know exactly what that costs," Clara said. They looked at each other across the table. This was the moment she understood that what was happening between them was not what she had been telling herself it was. It was not a strange weekly coffee arrangement with a dangerous man she'd had the poor judgment to help. It was not gratitude or guilt or obligation on either side. It was recognition. Two people who had learned to compress themselves into shapes that could survive their respective lives, sitting in a quiet room, recognizing the compression in each other. She stood up abruptly. Her hip protested. "I need to finish my floor," she said. "Clara." "Good night, Adrian." She took her cart and went back to work. She cleaned 3 offices and a bathroom and a break room, and her hands moved automatically through the familiar tasks while her mind moved through something entirely different. She took the elevator down alone. In the lobby, she paused. She looked at her reflection in the dark glass of the door. She looked at the woman who was not who she used to be and had not yet figured out who she was becoming. Then she went out into the cold and walked the 6 blocks to the bus stop and went home. She did not sleep well. She didn't expect to. The call came on a Saturday afternoon. Clara was doing laundry sitting on the edge of the bathtub, waiting for the wash cycle to finish, because their apartment's ventilation was poor, and the dryer made the main room unbearably humid when her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She answered it anyway. She'd been answering unknown numbers since the accident, because sometimes important calls came from unknown numbers, and you couldn't afford to miss them. "Ms. Bennett," a woman's voice professional, brisk. "This is Dr. Renata Voss calling from Midwest Orthopedic Specialists. I'm reaching out regarding a consultation referral that was submitted on your behalf." Clara went very still. "I didn't submit any referral." "No, the referral was submitted by a third party." A pause. "I understand that may be surprising. I want to be clear that there's no obligation on your part. The appointment is simply being offered fully covered with no cost to you. Dr. Hansen is one of the leading spinal and hip trauma specialists in the country. He has a cancellation on Monday at 2 in the afternoon." Clara stood up from the bathtub edge. "Who submitted the referral?" "The paperwork lists a private foundation. I don't have more detail than that." "A private foundation." Clara pressed 2 fingers against the bridge of her nose. "What does the consultation involve?" "A full assessment of your current condition, review of previous imaging and surgical records, discussion of options that may have developed in the past 4 years, including newer approaches to nerve damage and joint reconstruction." "Joint reconstruction," Clara repeated. "It's a consultation, Ms. Bennett. Dr. Hansen will tell you what's possible and what isn't. No commitment beyond the conversation." The laundry machine beeped. Clara stood in the bathroom doorway for a moment. "Monday at 2, she said. "Yes. I'll be there." She ended the call. She sat down on the pull-out couch, Ethan's couch with its thin cushions and the faint smell of his shampoo, and stared at the opposite wall for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and called the number on the matte black card. It rang once. "Clara?" "You arranged a doctor's appointment for me," she said. Silence. "Adrian." "The appointment is an option," he said. "You don't have to go." "I told you not to do this. You told me not to solve your transportation problem. You said nothing about medical care." "That is—" She stopped. Started again. "That is exactly the kind of distinction that makes me want to throw this phone into the lake." "But you're not going to," he said, "because Dr. Hansen is the best hip and spinal trauma specialist in the Midwest, and you know what you've been living with for 4 years, and somewhere underneath the anger you're feeling right now is the knowledge that you deserve better options than the ones you've had access to." The accuracy of this was infuriating. "You had no right," she said. "No," he agreed. "I didn't. I'm a person, Adrian, not a situation you can manage. I know that. Do you Because this feels like management. A pause. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted, not defensive, not explanatory. Something quieter. Something that didn't sound rehearsed. I watched you walk down that corridor on Thursday night, he said, in 31-degree weather, after 6 blocks. And you were in so much pain that you were holding your breath every third step, and you didn't say a single word about it. He paused. And you're right that it's not my place. You're right that I had no right. But I couldn't. I didn't want to watch you hold your breath like that and do nothing. Clara pressed her hand flat against the couch cushion. You watched me that carefully, she said. I watch you that carefully. The apartment was quiet. From outside came the sounds of the neighborhood. Someone's television, a car door, children's voices 2 floors up. I'm angry with you, she said. I know. I'm going to go to the appointment. I know that too. Don't arrange anything else without asking me first. All right. I mean it. Clara. His voice was very quiet. I heard you. She held the phone for a moment. The anger was still there, but it had moved, shifted from the front of her chest to somewhere more complicated, somewhere it was going to take time to examine. You're the most difficult person I've ever met, she said. You've met me. That's not... She almost laughed. She stopped herself. Good night, Adrian. Good night, Clara. She ended the call. She sat on Ethan's couch in the quiet apartment and looked at the ceiling and understood fully and without pretense that she was in serious trouble. Not the kind that had a phone number to call. The other kind. Why? The appointment with Dr. Hansen lasted 2 hours and 17 minutes. Clara had come prepared to be disappointed. She had spent 4 years being told what was not possible, and she had made a kind of internal peace with a future that moved within specific limits. She had not realized until she sat in Dr. Hansen's office and he began talking about developments in the past 3 years, nerve regeneration approaches, a newer joint reconstruction technique, a specific combination of surgical intervention and targeted rehabilitation that had produced results in cases structurally similar to hers. How tightly she had been holding that peace. How much it had been costing her to pretend it was enough. Dr. Hansen was a spare, careful man in his late 50s who spoke in exact sentences and did not soften his assessments. I want to be clear, he said, that I cannot promise you normal function. The nerve damage is significant and some of it is permanent. But the joint mechanics are more correctable than your previous team suggested. And with the right intervention, you could likely reduce your pain levels substantially and improve your range of motion in ways that would meaningfully change your daily life. Meaningfully change, Clara repeated. No more compensating gait in all likelihood. Reduced medication dependency. The ability to stand for extended periods without the level of pain you're currently managing. He paused. You've been doing remarkable work managing your condition. I want you to know that. But you shouldn't have to manage it at the level you have been. Clara looked at her hands in her lap. What would the process involve? She said. He told her. She listened. She asked 3 questions. He answered each one with the same careful exactness. When she left the office, she sat in the waiting room for 10 minutes before she trusted her legs to carry her to the elevator. She called Ethan. Hey, he said. What's up, you okay? I had a doctor's appointment. A pause. What kind of doctor? A specialist. For my hip. Clara. His voice changed. When did you make that appointment? You didn't tell me. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to get your hopes up before I knew what the situation was. That's... He made a sound that was half frustration, half something else. Clara, you can't keep doing that. You can't keep managing me. I know. She paused. I'm sorry. Silence. What did he say? Ethan asked. She told him. Not everything, not all at once, but the main thing's the possibility of better function. The reduced pain, the actual chance at something different from what she'd been living. She heard him go quiet in the middle of it, and then she heard him take a breath that was trying very hard not to be something louder. Ethan? I'm fine, he said. His voice was slightly rougher than normal. You don't have to be fine. I know. A pause. Who arranged this? You said a foundation covered the consultation. What foundation? Clara had been waiting for that question. Someone I know, she said. Someone you know. A contact, through work. Through cleaning offices. It's a long story. Clara. His voice was very quiet now, very careful. Is it the same person who dealt with the situation at the hardware store? She didn't answer immediately. Clara. Yes, she said. A long silence. How involved are you with this person? Ethan said. It's not Ethan. It's not what you're thinking. I'm thinking my sister, who hasn't asked anyone for help in 4 years, has someone arranging medical appointments and handling problems for her. And I'm thinking, I want to know who that person is. Not over the phone. When? Come home for dinner tonight. I'll tell you what I can. What you can, he repeated. Not everything. Ethan. Yeah. He was quiet. Okay, tonight. He paused. Clara, are you safe? Yes. Are you sure? She thought about it honestly. Really honestly, not the version she'd given herself. I think so, she said. That's less certain than yes. I know. She paused. Tonight. Dinner. I'll explain. She ended the call. She sat in the specialist's waiting room for another 5 minutes. Then she got up and went out into the cold. She didn't tell Ethan Adrian's name that night. She told him enough that she'd witnessed something she wasn't supposed to see, that she'd made a choice to intervene, that the man involved had resources, and had used some of them to help her when she'd called in a favor for the hardware store situation. She told him it was complicated, and that she was handling it, and that she was not in danger. Ethan listened to all of it with the particular stillness he had, the focused, contained attention that he'd inherited or absorbed from watching her, the way younger siblings absorbed things. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Are you making a good decision here? He said. I don't know yet, Clara said, but I'm making a conscious one. He looked at her for a long time. Do you trust him? She thought about a man sitting across from her in an empty conference room, saying, I couldn't watch you hold your breath like that and do nothing. I trust that he's honest with me, she said. What he's honest about is sometimes alarming. But yes, I trust that he says what he means. That's different from being safe. I know. She paused. But for me right now, it's almost the same thing. Ethan looked at his hands. I want to meet him. I'm not asking permission, Clara. You're my sister. If someone is this involved in your life, I want to meet him. She looked at her brother across the dinner table, 20 years old, and holding his face steady and meaning every word. I'll see what I can arrange, she said. Which was something she'd learned from a man she'd known for less than 3 weeks, and the irony of it did not escape her. The next time she went to the 14th floor, she told Adrian what Ethan had said. She expected resistance. She got silence instead, and then something that took her a moment to identify consideration. He sounds like you, Adrian said. He's better than me. That's what you think. It's what I know. Adrian turned his cup. When? He's free Saturday afternoons. Saturday, he repeated. He nodded slowly. All right. Clara looked at him. You're agreeing. Did you expect me not to? I didn't know what to expect. He looked at her. Clara, your brother is 20 years old and working at a hardware store and studying a subject he doesn't actually want to study. He deserves to meet the people in his sister's life and make his own assessment. She looked at him for a long moment. You're not what I expected, she said. What did you expect? Someone who controlled everything, who made all the decisions, who didn't consult. I control a great many things, Adrian said. I don't control you. That's a distinction I'm aware of. Why? He looked at her steadily. Because you walked through a door for a stranger. Because you called me about a hardware store and then told me we were even. Because you told me not to solve your transportation problem and meant it. And then 10 minutes later, you came back anyway. He paused. Because you are the first person in a very long time who has been in my proximity and wanted nothing from me that I could give with money or threat. The room was very quiet. What do I want from you? Clara said. It came out more vulnerable than she intended. He looked at her directly. The same thing I want from you, he said. A real conversation, with someone who doesn't perform. Clara looked at the table. Her chest felt tight in a way that had nothing to do with her hip. That's a small thing, she said. It's the hardest thing, he said. She looked up. He held her gaze without flinching. Adrian, she said. Yes. Tell me something true. Something you don't tell people. He was quiet. The question sat between them. Then, I don't sleep well, he said. I haven't in 15 years. I wake at 3 in the morning and I lie there cataloging everything I've done and everything I still owe and everything I can't give back. He paused. Most mornings I'm at my desk by 4. My staff thinks it's discipline. It's not. What is it? It's the only thing I know how to do with the time, he said. Work is quieter than the inside of my own head. Clara thought about her own nights. The pain at 3 in the morning that she managed with breathing exercises she'd learned in physical therapy. The mental inventory of bills and appointments and Ethan's college deadlines. The way she sometimes lay perfectly still and listed every good thing she could think of because it was the only technique that worked. I make lists, she said. He looked at her. At 3 in the morning, when it's bad, I list things. Not problems, good things, specific ones. The way the light looks in early morning before the city wakes up. The sound of Ethan playing guitar when he thinks I'm sleeping. She paused. It sounds childish. It sounds like it works, he said. Sometimes. He looked at her with that attention, the full, undefended attention that she'd decided was the most disorienting thing about him. Tell me one, he said. One what? One thing on the list, right now. She looked at him. Coffee that's better than anything I can afford, she said. At 11:30 at night, in a building I'm paid to clean. Something happened in his face. That near smile closer than ever. That's a very specific good thing, he said. The specific ones are the ones that actually work, she said. He turned the cup once more in his hands. Clara, he said. Yes. Saturday, he said. Bring your brother. She nodded. She stood up and collected her cart. She was nearly at the elevator when she heard him behind her. She turned. He was standing in the doorway of the conference room, jacket in hand. The hip specialist, he said. What did he tell you? She looked at him. He said there might be more options than I thought. Good. I'm still angry with you for arranging it without asking. I know. But I'm going to pursue the options. He held her gaze. Good, he said again. She turned and pressed the elevator button. The doors opened. Adrian. She didn't turn around. Don't change who you are because of this, whatever this is. A silence. You first, he said. She got in the elevator. The doors closed. And Clara stood in the descending elevator with her hands loose at her sides and her hip aching and the ghost of a real smile on her face for the first time in longer than she could immediately remember. Saturday came cold and bright. Ethan was quiet on the bus ride over. Clara didn't push him. She watched the city move past the window and thought about the gap between the life she'd built and the life she hadn't expected to be building now, and how strange it was that those two lives had started to overlap. Adrian met them in the lobby of a restaurant on the north side. Not an ostentatious place. Deliberately not. Ethan noticed. She could see him cataloging the choice, the same way she'd cataloged it. Someone had thought about what would feel least like a performance. He was already there when they arrived. Standing near the window in civilian clothes that still looked expensive, but were calibrated to read as simply well-made. He saw them come in and moved toward them without hesitation. He looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at him. Whatever assessment was happening on both sides happened in about 4 seconds, and then Adrian extended his hand. "Ethan," he said, "I've heard a lot about you." Ethan shook it. He was careful, measuring. "She told me almost nothing about you." Adrian glanced at Clara. Something dry moved through his eyes. "That sounds right?" They sat down. For the first 15 minutes it was awkward, in the way that honest things are sometimes awkward. Not fake awkward, not performed awkward, but the real friction of people who mattered to the same person, figuring out their angles. Then Ethan said, "You deal with problems that other people can't deal with through normal channels." Adrian didn't look surprised by the directness. "Sometimes." "And what do you want from my sister in exchange for what you've already done?" "Ethan?" Clara started. "No." Ethan's voice was steady. "He can answer." Adrian looked at Ethan for a moment. He set down his fork. "Nothing," he said. "I want nothing from her that she hasn't freely chosen to give." "And what has she freely chosen to give?" "Her time," Adrian said. "Her honesty. Her opinion, which is consistently more useful than anyone else's. And coffee occasionally, though the coffee is actually mine." Ethan stared at him. Then slowly, something in his face changed. Not softening entirely, he was too much Clara's brother for that, but the set of his jaw loosened slightly. "She doesn't need protection," Ethan said. "I know that. She's been protecting herself and me for 4 years. She doesn't need another person making decisions for her." "She told me the same thing. I respected it." He paused. "Except once. When I arranged the medical appointment without asking. She was furious with me. She should have been. She was right to be." Adrian's voice was even unapologetic. "I made a unilateral decision because I was frustrated by a situation I couldn't directly address, and I used the one resource available to me. It was wrong. I should have asked first." Ethan looked at him for a long time. He looked at Clara. He looked back at Adrian. "She's going to do whatever she decides to do," Ethan said, "regardless of what I think." "I know," Adrian said. "That's probably why she brought you, not to ask permission, to tell someone important." Ethan went quiet. "You're strange," he said finally. "Your sister said the same thing," Adrian said. Clara looked at the ceiling. "I'm right here," she said. Both of them looked at her. "I know," they said in almost identical tones at almost the same time. She looked back and forth between them. "This is going to be a problem," she said. Something moved in Adrian's face, and for the first time with her brother watching it, moved all the way. Not a near smile. An actual one. Brief, unexpected, completely real. Ethan saw it. He looked at his sister. Clara was looking at the table. And Ethan Bennett, who was 20 years old and smarter than he knew he was, understood something in that moment that his sister was not quite ready to say out loud. He picked up his fork. "So," he said carefully, "what's good here?" Back to back. After dinner, walking back to the bus stop, Adrian had offered a car and Clara had declined for both of them, which Adrian had accepted without argument, and which Ethan had noted Ethan was quiet for most of a block. Then he said, "He's in love with you." Clara kept walking. "Don't." "Clara. It's complicated." "Most true things are." He paused. "Are you in love with him?" She walked another half block. "I don't know yet," she said. "Do you want to know?" She thought about it, about the clean, honest answer underneath the complicated one. "Yes," she said. "I think I do." Ethan was quiet. "He's dangerous," he said. "I know. Being around him puts you in a world that has nothing to do with who we are. I know that too. And you're still going to see him." She looked at her brother sideways. "Tell me I shouldn't." Ethan looked back at her. He looked at the city around them, at the lights and the traffic, and the ordinary, complicated living that was their actual life. "I'm not going to tell you that," he said. "Why not?" "Because you stepped between a man and a knife for a stranger," Ethan said. You called the most powerful person you'd ever met on behalf of my boss. You went to a specialist's office and sat across from someone telling you your options might be better than you thought, and you didn't fall apart, you just listened and planned. He paused. I'm not telling you what to do. I never was. I just needed to see him. And? Ethan was quiet for a moment. He looks at you like you're the first real thing he's seen in a very long time, he said, which is either the best possible thing or the most dangerous one. It might be both, Clara said. Yeah, Ethan said. It might be. They walked the rest of the way to the bus stop in the cold, their breath making small clouds in the night air, and Clara thought about best possible things and dangerous ones, and how often in her life they had turned out to be exactly the same thing. The bus came. They got on. And somewhere across the city, Clara was certain Adrian Moretti was sitting at his desk at a late hour, not quite sleeping, turning a cup in his hands, making his own version of a list. The physical therapy center that Dr. Hansen recommended was on the north side, 40 minutes from Clara's apartment by bus. She started going on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, which meant rearranging her sleep schedule around her night shifts in a way that left her running on 5 hours most days. She didn't complain about it. She didn't tell Adrian either, because telling him would invite the conversation about transportation that she had explicitly closed. She told herself she was managing fine. Her body told her something different by the second week. The new therapist was a woman named Grace Park, early 30s, precise with the particular gift of knowing exactly how hard to push before pulling back. Grace had reviewed Dr. Hansen's notes and developed a program that was more aggressive than anything Clara had done before, more targeted, more honest about what the goal was. You've been compensating, Grace told her the first session. For 4 years, your left side has been doing the work your right side can't do. We're going to have to re-educate your whole movement pattern, not just the damaged joint. How long? Clara said. Honestly, 6 months minimum before you see the full picture, but you'll feel differences within 4 to 6 weeks. Clara thought about 4 to 6 weeks. She thought about 6 months. She thought about the fact that she was 26 years old and had spent 4 years believing this was simply what the rest of her life was going to feel like. All right, she said. Let's start. Grace looked at her for a moment. Most people need more convincing than that. Most people didn't spend 2 years being told it wasn't worth trying, Clara said. Grace nodded slowly. Fair enough. The sessions were brutal in the specific way that necessary things are brutal, not cruel, not excessive, just exactly as hard as the problem required. Clara went home afterward and slept for 2 hours before her evening shift and some nights on the bus to the Harrington Tower. She sat with her eyes closed and her hand pressed against her right hip and counted her breathing the way Grace had taught her. But she went back every Tuesday and Thursday, and on Tuesday and Thursday nights she was still on the 14th floor at 11:30. Adrian noticed the change in her face before she told him anything. He noticed it the way he noticed everything about her quietly, without making it into a moment, a simple observation that he filed and waited to address when the time was right. You started the therapy, he said one night about 10 days in. Yes. It's harder than you expected. It's exactly as hard as I expected. She paused. I expected it to be very hard. Is it working? She considered. Ask me in 4 weeks. He nodded. He didn't push. This was one of the things about him that continued to disarm her, the willingness to stop at the boundary she drew, without making her feel that stopping had cost him something. Tell me about today, he said instead. So she did. Not just the therapy, the whole day. The argument she'd overheard between 2 of Dolores's other cleaners about a shift reassignment. The article Ethan had texted her about a guitar player he admired. The woman on the bus who'd been reading the same paperback novel for 3 weeks and was finally apparently on the last chapter. Adrian listened to all of it. He asked one question about the guitar player, whether Ethan had ever performed publicly, and when Clara said no, not yet, he was quiet for a moment in the way that meant he was thinking rather than pausing. He should, Adrian said. I know. Is it money? It's partly money. It's partly Ethan has spent 4 years watching me make practical choices, and he's internalized the idea that wanting things costs too much. You could tell him that's not what you intended. I have told him. She looked at her coffee. The things we teach people without meaning to are harder to unteach than the things we say directly. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Yes, he said. I know that. Something in his voice made her look up. He was looking at the table. His expression had the particular quality of someone who had just said more than they planned to. Who did you teach something to without meaning to? She said. He looked up. That's a very direct question. I learned from someone. A small silence. Then he turned his cup. The people who work for me, he said. The ones who've been with me a long time. I taught them without ever saying it directly that the only currency that matters is power. That everything else is a liability. He paused. I didn't mean to teach them that. I thought I was teaching them to be strong. What's the difference, Clara said, between those two things to you? He looked at her. Strength is what you have when you've chosen what to protect. Power is what you accumulate when you've stopped knowing. She held his gaze. When did you stop knowing? Gradually, he said. The way things go wrong gradually. You look up and it's been 10 years and the people around you are afraid of you in a way that has nothing to do with respect and everything to do with the fact that they've watched you make choices that scared them. Are they right to be afraid? He was quiet for a moment. Some of them, he said. Not all of them. Are you going to change that? He looked at her. I've been thinking about it more than I have in years. He paused. You make me think about it. I'm a cleaning woman who walked into the wrong room. You're the most clear-eyed person I've encountered in longer than I can easily calculate, he said. What you do for a living has nothing to do with it. Clara looked at him for a long time. Adrian, she said. Yes, I need to tell you something. All right. Whatever is happening between us, I don't have a name for it, and I'm not asking you to name it. But I need you to understand that I can't be part of your life if your life stays exactly as it is. The room went still. Not a threatening stillness. A real one, the quiet of two people saying the true thing to each other. I know that, he said. I'm not an ultimatum person. I'm not telling you to change for me. I know. I'm telling you because you deserve to make that decision with real information, not because I'm asking you to choose. He looked at her for a long moment. And if I told you I've already been choosing, that I've been choosing since a Tuesday night in November when a woman with a cleaning cart told me someone had to. Clara looked at the table. Her chest felt tight again. Then I'd say, don't do it because of me, she said quietly. Do it because of the person you said you used to be. A long silence. He was angry, Adrian said, and young. He also believed someone had to, Clara said. That's not nothing. That's actually the most important thing. He was very still. After a moment, he stood up and walked to the window the first time in all their conversations that he'd moved away from the table when things got real, instead of staying exactly where he was. She watched him stand at the glass, his back to her, looking at the city below. She waited. My father ran a neighborhood, he said. His voice was different, lower, more careful. Not the way I run things, smaller. He collected money from local businesses, kept the peace on 2 or 3 blocks, made sure nobody who wasn't supposed to operate in the area got any ideas. He paused. He was not a good man in the technical sense. He did things I don't excuse. But he also made sure the kids on our block could walk home from school. He made sure the families who couldn't pay rent in winter didn't lose their heat. He made sure... He stopped. He made sure someone was there, Clara said. Adrian turned from the window. He looked at her. Yes, he said. He made sure someone was there. He paused. He died when I was 19. In a way I won't describe. And after that I decided I was going to make sure no one could do to me or to anyone I chose to protect what was done to him. And you built this. I built this. Built. Clara looked at him. The man at the window. The man who had been turning a cup in his hands and listening to her tell him about bus passengers and guitar players and the specific weight of a life rebuilt from scratch. The angry young man who believed someone had to, she said. He built this to protect people. That's a very generous interpretation. It's what you just told me. I also told you I've done things I don't excuse. I know. She held his gaze. I'm not excusing them. I'm telling you that the thing you started from is still in there. I've been watching you for weeks. It's still in there, Adrian. He was very still. You see things that aren't there, he said. I see things people decide not to show, she said. That's different. He came back to the table. He sat down. He looked at her with the undefended attention that still after weeks was the most disorienting thing about him. Clara, he said. Yes. I want to say something, and I need you to hear it exactly as I mean it. All right. I have not felt like a person in a very long time, he said. I've felt like a function, like a system, like a set of decisions and consequences and obligations, and in this room for the past several weeks, I have felt like a person. He paused. I'm aware that's more information than I've given anyone in 15 years. I'm giving it to you because you asked me for something true. Clara looked at him. Her hands were very still on the table. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me. I know, she said. But I'm going to anyway. Something in his face, not the almost smile, not the full one either, but something older and quieter than either, moved slowly to the surface. And Clara Bennett, who had spent 4 years compressing herself into the shape that survival required, felt something inside her loosen very slightly. Not completely, not all at once, but enough to notice. That was the moment his phone rang. He looked at it. His expression changed in a way she'd never seen, a rapid, complete shift, every softness gone, replaced by something alert and cold, and entirely different from the man who'd been sitting across from her. I need to take this, he said. Go ahead. He stood and moved to the far end of the room. She heard only fragments, his voice very low, very flat, the tone she'd heard once before in this room, when he was speaking to someone he was about to make afraid. When he came back to the table, his face was closed. What happened? Clara said. Nothing that concerns tonight. Adrian. He looked at her. I need to go. What happened? A pause. He picked up his jacket. He put it on with the unhurried precision that meant he was controlling his reaction. An associate of mine has been having conversations he shouldn't be having, he said, with people who are not my friends. What does that mean? It means I have a problem that requires my attention. Is it serious? He looked at her. Yes. She looked back at him. Are you going to be safe? Something in his expression shifted at the question. Not surprise exactly, he'd stopped being surprised by her, but something that responded to being asked the way a plant responds to water. Something that had been waiting for the question without knowing it. Yes, he said. Are you sure? Clara. His voice was quiet. Yes. She stood up. She looked at him across the table. Come back when it's handled. I'll be here Tuesday. Not Tuesday. Come back when it's handled and tell me you're all right. A very short silence. I'll call you, he said. Good. He moved toward the door. At the doorway he paused. Go straight home tonight. That's my line, she said. Something crossed his face that was too brief to fully catch. Tuesday, he said. He was gone. Clara stood in the empty conference room for a moment. The city moved outside the window. The building hummed around her. She picked up her cart and went back to work. But the tightness in her chest didn't leave. And she understood, walking down that corridor, that the tightness was fear. Real fear. Not for herself, for him. Which told her everything she hadn't quite been ready to know. He didn't call that night. He didn't call the next day. Clara worked her shift and went home and slept badly, and woke at 3 a.m. with her hip aching and her phone dark and silent on the nightstand. She looked at it for a long moment. She did not call. She had not agreed to call. She had said come back when it's handled, and he had said I'll call you. And those were the terms they'd set, and she was going to honor them, because honoring them was the only thing she could control. She made a list. It was a short list. The coffee. Grace Park's voice saying you've been compensating and making it sound like something that could be fixed. Ethan's guitar faint through the wall. The look on Adrian's face when she'd told him the angry young man who believed someone had to was still in there. She fell back asleep at 4:15. He called at noon the next day. It's handled, he said. She exhaled. She hadn't realized she'd been holding the breath since the night before. Are you all right? She said. Yes. Are you sure? Clara. Adrian. A pause. Yes, he said. I'm sure. Something in his voice was different. Not closed the way it had been when he left, but not fully open either. Somewhere in between. Somewhere that felt like the aftermath of something difficult that he wasn't going to describe. What happened? She said. Someone I trusted made a choice that endangered people I'm responsible for. I resolved it. Resolved how? In a way that won't happen again. She understood she wasn't going to get more than that. She understood, too, that pressing wouldn't produce honesty. It would only produce better constructed evasion. Okay, she said. Okay. He seemed to expect more. I told you I wasn't going to ask you to be someone you're not. That includes asking you to describe things you've decided to keep private. She paused. But I want you to know that when you say resolved in a way that won't happen again, I hear what's underneath that. A silence. I know you do, he said. And I need you to know that I hear it, and I'm still here, and I'm still going to be on the 14th floor on Tuesday night. Because I told you, I see things people don't show, and what I see is someone trying to change the direction of something very large and very fast, and that doesn't happen all at once. She paused. So I'm here. The silence that followed was the longest one he'd ever given her. Clara, he said. Yes. I don't deserve that. You don't get to decide what I give you, she said. That's mine to decide. Another silence. Tuesday, he said. Tuesday, she said. She ended the call. She sat with her phone in her hand and looked at the wall and understood that she was fully in this now. Not approaching it, not considering it. In it completely without any of the carefully maintained distance she'd been using to tell herself she still had options. She didn't mind as much as she expected. What she didn't know, what she had no way of knowing, was that 48 hours after that phone call, she had already been noticed. His name was Vincent Caruso, and he was 54 years old, and had been working around the edges of Adrian Moretti's operation for 11 years, with the patience of a man who had decided very early that the most effective strategy was to wait. He had never pushed. He had never challenged directly. He had simply watched and cataloged and waited for the moment when Adrian Moretti showed something worth using. He had been watching for 11 years, and then, one night in November, through a contact who had access to the building's security logs, Vincent Caruso saw footage of Adrian Moretti hanging up a phone call to sit down with a cleaning woman in a conference room on the 14th floor of the Harrington Tower. He watched the footage 3 times. He watched the way Adrian listened to her. He watched the body language that was so different from every other interaction on any other footage he had of this man. The quality of attention, the stillness, the absence of performance. He made a phone call of his own. "Find out who she is," he said. "Everything." He had his answer within 48 hours. Clara Bennett, 26 years old, night cleaning staff, Harrington Tower, and 3 other buildings in the River North Financial District. Younger brother Ethan, 20 community college. 1-bedroom apartment in Northwest Chicago. Medical history involving a spinal and hip injury from a vehicle accident 4 years prior. No criminal record. No known associates in any organization. Nobody. She was absolutely nobody, which was exactly what made her useful. Vincent Caruso looked at his information for a long time. Then he said to the man sitting across from him, "Adrian Moretti has never had a weakness, Not in 11 years. He paused. He has one now. Thud. Clara didn't know any of this when she got on the bus to the Harrington Tower on Tuesday night. She didn't know it when she badged through the service entrance, or when she loaded her cart, or when she pushed the button for the 14th floor. She knew only that her hip was cooperating better than usual. Grace had said last Thursday that something was shifting in the mechanics of her right side, that the compensating patterns were beginning to release, and that she had slept 6 consecutive hours the night before for the first time in recent memory, and that somewhere in the city, Adrian Moretti was handling the aftermath of whatever had happened, and would be on the 14th floor when she got there. She stepped off the elevator. She noticed the man at the end of the corridor before she fully processed what was wrong. He was standing too still. People who belonged in buildings at 11:30 moved. They were going somewhere, doing something, carrying something. This man was just standing, near the stairwell door, looking at his phone with the convincing posture of someone doing something ordinary. Clara pushed her cart forward. She kept her pace even. She did not look at him again. She was 30 feet from the conference room when she heard the footstep behind her. Not one footstep. Two. 2 different gates, 2 different weights. She kept walking. 20 feet. Ms. Bennett? She stopped. She turned around. There were 3 of them. The man who'd been near the stairwell, and 2 others who must have come from the offices flanking the corridor. They were not performing anything, no pretense of belonging, no manufactured reason for being here. They were simply there, arranged between her and the elevator, looking at her with the particular expression of men who had been sent to do a specific thing and intended to do it. "I don't know who you are," Clara said. Her voice came out steady. She was surprised. "You don't need to," the first man said. He was the oldest of the 3, maybe 50, with careful eyes. "We just need you to pass along a message." "A message to who?" "You know who." Her hand was on the cart. The conference room door was 20 feet ahead. She didn't know if Adrian was already inside or still in transit, and she understood that calling out would tell these men exactly what they wanted to know about how important this room was to her. "I clean buildings," she said. "I don't pass along messages." "You do for him," the first man said. He stepped forward, not aggressively, just enough to collapse the distance to a point that felt intentional. "Tell Moretti that his arrangement with the Delano supply chain is terminated. Tell him that Vincent Caruso sends his regards. And tell him that the next time he decides to develop personal attachments to civilians, he should remember that civilians are very easy to find." Clara looked at him steadily. "I told you I clean buildings." The man looked at her for a moment. He looked at her leg, the slight irregularity in how she was standing, the way her weight distributed. He looked at it the way men look at something they've already decided they can use. "I know about your brother," he said. The air in the corridor changed. Clara kept her face exactly as it was. "I think you should leave this building," she said. "Or what?" said the second man, who was younger and less controlled and therefore more dangerous. "Or I'm going to make enough noise that every security person in this building knows your faces," Clara said. "And I'm going to give your description to Dolores Reyes, who is the supervisor of the cleaning staff for this district, and who knows everyone in every building, and inside of 24 hours, every person who works in this industry will know your faces too." She paused. "I'm nobody, but I know everyone who's nobody in this city, and nobody is a lot of people." The first man looked at her for a long time. Something in the second man's posture had changed, not retreat, but recalculation. "Tell Moretti," the first man said. And then he turned and walked toward the stairwell. The other 2 followed. Clara stood very still in the corridor until she heard the stairwell door close. Then she let out the breath she'd been holding. Her hands were shaking, not slightly, significantly. She gripped the cart and made herself breathe the way Grace had taught her, and told herself that shaking was normal. That shaking was the body processing adrenaline correctly, that shaking meant she was still standing and had done nothing wrong. She pushed the cart to the conference room. Adrian was inside. He took one look at her face and stood up. "What happened?" she told him. She told him cleanly and directly, without editorializing, the same way she approached everything: the man's description, the message, the name, Vincent Caruso, the mention of Ethan. She watched his face while she talked. She watched it go from present to contained to very still in a way that was different from his normal stillness. This stillness had temperature. It was cold. "They were already gone when I walked away," she said. "I got them to leave." "How?" she told him. He listened. When she finished, he looked at her for a moment, and she saw something move through his expression that she hadn't seen before. Several things layered on top of each other quickly. Anger was one of them. Something else was underneath it. Something that looked almost like pain, except that it was pointed inward rather than outward. "Sit down," he said. "I'm fine." "Clara, please sit down." She sat. He moved to the door, stepped into the corridor, said something she couldn't hear to someone who must have been just outside. Then he came back in and closed the door. "You told them you were nobody," he said. "I am nobody." "You are not nobody." His voice had an edge she hadn't heard directed at her before. Not anger at her, she understood the difference, but something fierce and complicated that was trying to find the right direction. "Clara, you are—" "I handled it," she said. "They're gone." "This time." "Yes, this time." He pulled the chair across from her and sat down. He looked at her with the careful, undefended attention that she'd learned to read, and what she saw underneath it now was something close to devastation. "Caruso," he said quietly. "You know him." "I've known of him for 11 years. He's never moved directly against anything of mine." He paused. He was waiting for something worth using. The sentence landed between them. "He thinks I'm worth using," Clara said. "He thinks you're a weakness." Adrian's voice was very controlled. "He doesn't understand what you actually are." "What do I actually am?" Clara said. He looked at her. "The only reason I'm looking at any of this differently," he said. "The only reason I went back to that conversation and asked myself what kind of man I was starting from." He paused. "That's what you are. And Caruso is going to try to use that against me." "And what are you going to do about it?" "I'm going to deal with Caruso," he said. "How?" A pause. "In the way that ends it." "Adrian." She held his gaze. "Tell me what that means." He looked at her for a long time. "It means I'm going to make it very clear to Vincent Caruso that the cost of continuing this direction is higher than he can afford, without violence, if that's what you're asking." "Is that possible?" "Yes." He was certain about that. Caruso is a businessman. He responds to cost-benefit analysis. If the cost of using you outweighs the benefit of rattling me, he'll choose a different strategy. And if he doesn't, then I'll deal with that when it arrives. She looked at him. "And Ethan." "Ethan is going to be safe," Adrian said. His voice was completely flat. "I'm going to make certain of that." "Without asking me first." He stopped. She looked at him. "You said you were going to handle Ethan's safety, without asking me. After we talked about exactly that kind of decision." He held her gaze. "Clara, 3 men just told you that your brother's name is in someone's file because of me. I need you to let me—" "You need to ask me," she said. "Even now. Maybe especially now." She held his gaze. "Ask me." A silence. "Will you let me arrange additional security for Ethan until this is handled, without it being visible to him and in a way that won't disrupt his life?" Clara looked at him. "Yes," she said. "Thank you." "Don't thank me, just do it right." "I will." She looked at her hands. The shaking had stopped. At some point during the conversation, her body had decided the crisis was being managed and stood down. "I want to ask you something," she said. "Ask." "Before tonight, before the men in the corridor, were you going to say something when I walked in and sat down? You had something, I could see it in your face." He was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. "What was it?" He looked at the table. He looked at her. He turned the cup once in his hands. "I was going to ask you if you would consider something," he said. "Seeing me differently. Not in this building, not during your shift. Something that acknowledges what this actually is." Clara looked at him. "And then 3 men showed up in the corridor," she said. "And then 3 men showed up in the corridor." She was quiet for a moment. "Ask me anyway," she said. He looked at her. "Clara." He said her name the way he always said it, with a precision and completeness that made it sound like a full sentence. "Will you let me see you as something other than what we've been pretending this is?" She held his gaze. "Yes," she said. Neither of them moved. The building hummed around them. The city moved outside the glass. Somewhere in the building a door opened and closed. One of her colleagues, probably on a floor below, doing the ordinary invisible work of keeping things clean. "I need to finish my shift," Clara said. "I know." She stood. She picked up her cart. At the door she paused. She turned. "Adrian?" "Yes." "The men said Caruso sends his regards." She paused. "Which means he wanted you to know that he knows about me. He wasn't just sending a message. He was introducing himself to you through me." Adrian looked at her. "I know," he said. "This isn't finished." "No," he said. "It isn't." She held his gaze for one more moment. Then she went back to work. Her cart moved down the corridor, and she cleaned 3 rooms and 2 bathrooms and a break-room kitchen, and her hands moved through the familiar automatic work while her mind moved through everything that had just happened and everything that was still coming. And she thought about Ethan sleeping in their apartment on the pull-out couch, and about Vincent Caruso, who had watched security footage and decided that she was a weakness, and about Adrian sitting in the conference room right now, already making the calls that would handle this in the way that ended it. She thought about what it meant to be the first real thing someone had seen in a very long time. She thought about how that was beautiful and terrifying at exactly the same ratio. She took the elevator down at 4 in the morning. She walked through the lobby and out into the cold, and she was 3 steps from the door when she felt it, not saw, not heard, but felt the way you feel when the specific weight of someone's attention is on you from a direction that is not the direction you were expecting. She stopped. She looked at the street. A car that had been parked across the intersection pulled away from the curb, slowly, deliberately, making sure she saw it leave. Clara stood on the sidewalk in the 4 o'clock dark and watched the taillights disappear around the corner. Then she took out her phone. She called the number. Adrian answered on the first ring. "They didn't leave," she said. "I know," he said. "I see them." "You were watching." "I've been watching since they left the building." Clara closed her eyes. She stood on the sidewalk with the cold against her face and the empty street around her, and the voice of a man who had been watching to make sure she was safe. "Come get me," she said. It was the first time she had ever asked him for that. It came out simply, without apology, without the qualifier, "I don't usually ask for this," or the armor of, "I can take care of myself. Just come get me." "I'm already on my way," he said. He was there in 4 minutes. Clara knew it was 4 minutes because she counted. Not out of anxiety, she had moved past anxiety into a state of focused calm that she recognized from the worst days of her physical therapy. The days when the pain hit a level where panic became useless and clarity became the only available option. She stood on the sidewalk and counted and breathed and watched the street. The car that pulled up was not the kind of car that announced itself. Dark, unmarked, clean. Adrian was in the back seat. The door opened before the car fully stopped. She got in. He looked at her face the way he always looked at her, completely without flinching. He was assessing her the way she'd seen him assess situations, quickly and without drama, checking for damage. "Are you hurt?" he said. "No." "Are you sure?" "Adrian, I'm sure." He held her gaze for 1 more second. Then he looked forward and said something very quietly to the driver, and the car moved. They rode in silence for a full minute. Not an uncomfortable silence, the kind that happens when two people have just been through something and need a moment before they can put language around it. They were waiting to see if you'd call anyone, Clara said. Yes. They wanted to know if you'd respond. They wanted to see what I was worth to you in operational terms. Yes. And now they know. He looked at her. Now they know. She thought about that. I'm sorry, she said. He looked surprised genuinely, in the brief, unguarded way that real surprise showed on him. What are you apologizing for? You showed something you didn't want to show. Because of me. Clara. His voice was quiet and direct. I showed what I chose to show. Don't apologize for that. You didn't choose, they forced. I chose to come, he said. I could have sent someone else. I chose to come myself, knowing they were watching, because the alternative was sending a car for you while I sat in a building and you stood on a sidewalk at 4 a.m. He paused. That wasn't a difficult calculation. She looked at him. You complicated your own situation to come get me, she said. Yes. And you don't regret it. Not even slightly. She looked forward. The city moved past the windows. She thought about the taillights she'd watched disappear around the corner, and the knowledge that even their disappearance had been a message, a demonstration of surveillance, a way of saying we were here, we are here, we will continue to be here. Where are we going? She said. I'm taking you home. And then I'm going to handle the situation. Tonight. Tonight. She looked at him. His profile in the passing streetlights was the face she'd been looking at for 6 weeks now. The same angles, the same controlled expression, the same jaw that tightened slightly when something was bothering him, and he was deciding whether to address it. She had learned this face the way you learned a landscape you walked through every day, noticing new details without looking for them. Tell me what handling it means tonight, she said. It means I'm going to have a conversation with Vincent Caruso that resets the parameters of what he thinks is possible. You said he responds to cost-benefit analysis. He does. Then what's the cost you're going to show him? Adrian was quiet for a moment. I have information about Caruso that he believes is safely buried. Details about a particular business arrangement from 6 years ago that would be very damaging in several directions if it surfaced. He paused. I've never used it. I've never needed to. I've been holding it as insurance. And now you're going to use it. I'm going to tell him I have it and let him do the math. That's not violence, Clara said. No. But it is power. Yes. He glanced at her. Is that a problem? She thought about it honestly. I don't know yet, she said. I know I don't want anyone hurt. I know Ethan needs to be safe, and I need to be able to do my job. Within those requirements, she paused. I trust you to make the call. He was quiet for a moment. That's significant. I know it is. Clara, I don't take that lightly. I know you don't. She looked at him. That's why I said it. The car slowed as they turned onto her street. Clara recognized the approach to her building, the gas station on the corner, the laundromat with the broken sign, the particular quality of the streetlights on this block that was different from everywhere else, because one of the bulbs had been out for 3 months and the city hadn't come to fix it. The ordinary materials of her ordinary life. She looked at them and felt strangely no desire to apologize for them. She had spent enough time sitting across from Adrian Moretti in that conference room to know that he saw what was here, the real texture of how she lived, and had not once looked at it with the condescension of someone for whom this life was unimaginable. He looked at it the way he looked at her, directly, without flinching. The car stopped. She reached for the door. Clara. His hand came out and touched her arm. Brief, deliberate the first time he had touched her with intention, rather than the incidental contact of passing coffee cups. She went still. When this is resolved, he said, I want to talk about what comes next. She looked at him. What comes next, as in everything, he said. The question I asked you tonight before the corridor. The answer you gave me. What it means practically. What it means in terms of what you want. All of it. She looked at his hand on her arm. She looked at his face. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. She got out of the car. She went upstairs. She stood in the dark kitchen of her apartment and listened to Ethan's slow breathing from the other room and thought about 4 a.m. and cost-benefit analysis and the particular sensation of a man's hand on her arm that meant something neither of them had said out loud yet. She went to bed. She slept 6 hours. She woke up without the alarm. He called her at 10 the next morning. "It's done," he said. She sat up in bed. Caruso. "The conversation happened at 7 this morning. He's recalibrating." "You're sure?" "Caruso is not a man who makes threats he can't follow through on, but he's also not a man who ignores clear mathematics. The cost of continuing in this direction is now unambiguously higher than any benefit he could extract." Adrian paused. "He won't move directly against you or Ethan." "And you believe that?" "I believe he understands consequences. Yes." Clara exhaled slowly. "And the people he had watching the building." "Withdrawn as of 6 this morning." She looked at the ceiling. She thought about the man with the careful eyes who had said your brother's name, with the deliberate casualness of someone who wanted her to understand exactly what kind of leverage they thought they had. She thought about standing on that sidewalk, counting to 4. "It's over," she said. "This particular situation is over," he said carefully. "I want to be honest with you. My life contains other situations. I am trying to change the nature of what those situations look like going forward, but I won't tell you the work is done when it isn't." She had known from the night she walked through the conference room door that honesty was either going to be the thing that saved this or the thing that ended it. That had not changed. It was still the central fact. "I know," she said. And I said okay last night," she said. "I meant it then. I still mean it now." A silence. Clara. "Yes. I want to see you today. Not at 11:30, not in the building. During the day, like ordinary people." She thought about ordinary people and what that phrase cost him to say a man who had not had an ordinary anything in 20 years asking for an ordinary afternoon. "I have physical therapy at 2, she said. "After." 4 o'clock. "I'll pick you up from the clinic," he said. She almost argued the logistics. She stopped herself. "All right," she said. "All right," he said. She put down the phone. She sat in bed for a moment with the quiet apartment around her. Ethan's soft morning sounds from the other room, the light coming through the window at the angle it only achieved between 10 and 11 before the building across the street cut it off. She added it to the list. Grace noticed immediately. "You're different today," she said 15 minutes into the session. "Your body is different. What changed?" "I slept well," Clara said. "That's part of it." Grace guided her through the movement sequence she'd been building for 3 weeks, the careful incremental work of retraining her right side to trust itself again. "But it's something else. You're not bracing." "What do you mean?" "You always brace when we start, anticipating pain. Today you're not doing it." Grace paused. "That's significant. The anticipation of pain is sometimes as limiting as the pain itself." Clara thought about that. "Something changed," she admitted. "I don't entirely know how to describe it." "You don't have to describe it," Grace said. "Just keep not bracing." She kept not bracing. By the end of the session, Grace had her walking down the length of the room 3 times in a row and watched with the particular focused attention of someone who measured progress in fractions. At the end of the 3rd pass, she said, "Stand still." Clara stood still. "When you came to me 3 weeks ago, you were compensating with your left side so consistently that your left hip was beginning to show signs of strain from overwork." Grace paused. "Today on that last pass, you used your right side twice. You didn't do it consciously. Your body started to trust that it wouldn't be punished for trying." Clara looked at her. That's what we've been waiting for, Grace said. Once the body starts trusting again, the work accelerates. Clara stood in the therapy room and felt something move through her chest. Not a dramatic feeling. Nothing she would have been able to describe easily in words. Something quieter. Something that felt like the first morning after a very long storm, when the light came back and you realized the world was still there. She went out to the street at 4 o'clock. Adrian was already there. Not the car this time. He was standing on the sidewalk outside the clinic in the cold afternoon light in a dark coat, his hands in his pockets, looking at the street the way he looked at things he was deciding how to approach. He turned when he heard the door. He looked at her. She looked at him. "You came yourself," she said. "I came myself." "No driver." "No driver." She walked toward him. Her gait was different today. She hadn't entirely processed it until she saw his face register it. The change in her movement. The slightly more even distribution of weight. The absence of the compensating lean that she'd lived with for 4 years. His expression did something complicated and quick. She couldn't name all of it. She didn't try. "How was the session?" he said. "Good," she said. "Really good, actually." He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "Walk with me." They walked, not anywhere specific. Down the block around the corner, through a neighborhood that was neither hers nor his, somewhere in between ordinary and cold, and populated with the late afternoon traffic of people doing their Tuesday things. A woman with a stroller. 2 teenagers arguing about something with their phones out. A man walking a dog that was clearly walking him instead. They didn't talk for the first half block. It was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that had become somewhere in the past 6 weeks one of their actual languages. Then Adrian said, "I've been thinking about what you said, about the angry young man who believed someone had to. And I think I've been using that origin as a justification rather than a compass." Clara looked at him as they walked. "Explain the difference." A justification is what you point to when someone questions your choices. It's retrospective. It doesn't change anything going forward. He paused. A compass is what you use to navigate. It tells you where you're going, not just where you came from. And you want to use it as a compass. "I've been trying to figure out what that looks like practically," he said. "In a life that's built the way mine is built. What change actually means when you're not starting from nothing. What have you come up with?" He was quiet for a half block. "3 things," he said. "The first is withdrawing from the parts of my operation that I can't make clean. There are business interests I've maintained because they were profitable, and because walking away from them would have cost me leverage I thought I needed. I'm going to walk away from them anyway. At what cost to you?" "Significant." He said it simply. "The second thing is that I'm going to use the legitimate infrastructure I've built, property, investment, legal business, to do something other than maintain itself. There are neighborhoods in this city that are exactly like the one I grew up in. No services, no protection, nothing that works the way it's supposed to." He paused. "I have resources. I've been using them to make more resources. That can change." Clara looked at him. "And the third thing," she said. He looked at her. "The third thing is harder to say than the first 2. "Say it anyway." They were at the corner. He stopped walking. She stopped beside him. "The third thing," he said, "is that I want to stop being someone you have to accommodate. I've watched you manage around the reality of what I am not in a way that compromises you, but in a way that costs you something. The calculation you make every time you decide what to tell Ethan. The line you walk between what you actually know about me and what you can say out loud." He paused. "I don't want to be something you have to navigate around. I want to be someone you can stand next to without it costing you." The street moved around them. A bus went past. Somewhere nearby, someone was cooking something that smelled like garlic and warmth. "That's going to take time," Clara said. "I know. It's not a thing that happens because you've decided it. I know that too. Adrian." She looked at him directly. What you just described, withdrawing from the parts you can't make clean using what you've built for something other than maintaining itself. That's not three things. That's one thing. It's the same thing from different angles. He looked at her. It's choosing what to protect, she said, instead of what to control. He was very still. Yes, he said quietly. That's exactly what it is. She held his gaze. Then do that. Don't do it for me. Don't do it because of last night, or because of Caruso, or because you want to be someone I can stand next to without it costing me. Do it because you looked at this life you've built, and you decided it was time to use the compass instead of the justification. Something moved through his face, the thing underneath the controlled exterior that she'd been watching surface in fragments for weeks. It surfaced fully now, briefly, in the cold afternoon light, on an ordinary corner in a neighborhood that belonged to neither of them. Clara, he said. Yes. I need you to know something. Tell me. I have been in this life for 20 years, he said. I have made decisions that I cannot undo, and choices that I don't entirely excuse, and I have lived inside a version of myself that I built specifically because I thought it was the version that would survive. He paused. And in 6 weeks, sitting in a conference room with a woman who cleans offices and drinks coffee and makes lists at 3 a.m, I have remembered more clearly who I was trying to protect in the first place than I have in a very long time. He stopped. I wanted you to know that, independent of everything else. I wanted you to know what this has been. Clara looked at him for a long moment. The wind moved between the buildings. Somewhere a car horn sounded twice. I know, she said. You know. I've known for a while. She paused. I was waiting for you to say it. He looked at her. She looked back. And then she did something she had been thinking about for longer than she would easily admit. She reached out and put her hand over his, where it was at his side, cold from the November air, and she held it. He went very still. Then he turned his hand over and held hers back. They stood on the corner for a moment. Just that. Ethan found out about the Caruso situation on a Wednesday. Not from Clara, from the assistant manager at the hardware store, Danny Cho, who mentioned in passing that the men who'd been coming around had apparently had a change of heart and would not be returning, and that he'd heard through channels he didn't fully understand that someone with significant influence had made it permanently inconvenient for that particular group to operate in this part of the city. Ethan came home that night and found Clara at the kitchen table with a mug of tea and asked her very calmly what exactly had happened. She told him. Not everything. The specific operational details of Adrian and Caruso were not hers to share, and she said so. But the shape of it, that there had been a threat, that she had been in the building when it happened, that Adrian had responded, that it was handled, she told him that. Ethan was quiet for a long time after. You were on the sidewalk at 4 a.m, and a car was watching you, he said. Yes. And you called him. Yes. And he came. In 4 minutes. Ethan looked at his hands. He was doing the thing he did when he was processing something too large for his immediate reactions. The stillness, the inward attention, the waiting. Clara, he said. Yes. Are you in love with him? She looked at her tea. Yes, she said. The word came out with no qualification, no amendment, no careful surrounding framework of however, and nonetheless, and it's complicated. Just yes. Clean and direct the way she answered questions when she'd stopped pretending she didn't know the answer. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Okay, he said. Okay. He came in 4 minutes, Ethan said. He's restructuring what sounds like a significant portion of his life. He sat across from me at a restaurant and told me you deserve better options than the ones you've had access to without actually saying those words. He paused. And you just said yes without the 5 sentences of context you put around everything else that's hard for you to admit. He looked at her. Okay. Clara looked at her brother. You're 20 years old, she said. I know. When did you get this perceptive? I learned from someone, he said. And he got up and took his mug to the sink and said, "Tell him I said okay. He'll know what that means." He went to the other room. She heard after a moment the sound of his guitar. Not the careful, quiet version he played when he thought she was sleeping. The real version, open, warm, a chord progression that she didn't know the name of, but recognized immediately as something he'd written himself. She sat at the kitchen table and listened and drank her tea and thought that this was going in the list. High up, near the top. She told Adrian what Ethan said the next Tuesday night. He was quiet for a moment. He said, "Okay," Adrian repeated. Those were his exact words. Adrian looked at the table. Something in his face was doing several things at once. "I didn't expect that," he said. "I know. That's probably why it means something." He looked at her. "Your brother is 20 years old." "I know. He sounds 40. He learned from someone," Clara said. Something in Adrian's expression did the full thing. Not the almost smile, not the brief real one, but a longer version, quieter, the kind that stayed. She looked at it. She thought she could probably look at it for a long time. "Adrian," she said. "Yes." "How are the withdrawals going? The parts you said you were going to walk away from?" He straightened slightly. Back to the subject of work, she'd noticed he was more comfortable moving between personal and practical than most people. He didn't seem to experience the switch as jarring. 3 contracts terminated as of last week. 2 more in the process. The Delgado arrangement. He paused. That one is complicated. There are people in that arrangement who would be significantly worse off if I simply withdrew without transition. So you're transitioning. I'm finding alternative structures, ways to maintain the benefit to those people without the elements that aren't clean. Clara looked at him. You're not just walking away. You're staying until the people who'd be hurt by your leaving aren't. That's slower, he said. And harder. But yes. That's not what I expected you to do, she said. What did you expect? A clean break. Efficient. Clear. A clean break would be easier for me, he said. It wouldn't be easier for a lot of other people. He paused. You told me to use it as a compass, not a justification. The compass says stay until you can leave without leaving a hole. Clara looked at him for a long moment. You've thought about this very carefully, she said. I've been thinking about it since before you told me to. Since when? He turned the cup. Since a Tuesday night in November, when I looked at a woman who'd walked through the wrong door for the right reason and thought for the first time in 15 years that I had made a significant wrong turn somewhere and hadn't noticed until just then. The room was quiet. That's a very precise origin story, Clara said. I'm a precise person. You are. She looked at him. Adrian. Yes. I want to tell you something. Tell me. My first day of physical therapy with Grace, the new therapist, she told me I'd been compensating for 4 years, that my left side had been doing the work my right side couldn't do. And she said that once the body starts trusting again, the work accelerates. She paused. I've been thinking about that since she said it, not just about my hip. He looked at her steadily. What are you saying? He said. I'm saying that I've been compensating for a long time too, she said. Not just physically. The version of myself I built to get through the last 4 years careful contained practical no room for anything that cost too much. That version kept me going. I needed her. She paused. But I don't think I need to be only her anymore. The room held what she'd said for a moment. That's significant, he said quietly. I know. Are you telling me because of me? She thought about it honestly. I'm telling you because of me, she said. But you're part of why I can see it. She looked at him. That's how it works. People don't change because of other people. They change because of what they find in themselves when they're near someone who sees it. He was very still. Clara, he said. Yes. I'm going to say something and I need you to hear it without immediately telling me not to. She waited. "I want to take care of you," he said. "Not manage you, not solve you, not make decisions for you without asking. I mean that I want to be someone you can let take care of you when you need it, the same way you've been taking care of everything and everyone for 4 years without asking for any of it back." She looked at him. Her hands were still on the table. "That's going to be hard for me," she said. "I know. I have a very established pattern of Clara." His voice was gentle and direct at the same time, which was the combination she found most disarming in him. "I know. I'm not asking you to change it tonight. I'm telling you what I want, so you have the information." She looked at him for a long moment. "Okay," she said. He held her gaze. "Okay," he said. She picked up her coffee. He picked up his. The building settled around them. And then Adrian said, "Ethan's music." She looked at him. "What about it? You said he learned guitar from YouTube videos at the library." "Yes. Does he have an instrument at home?" "He has a second-hand acoustic guitar. It's missing the G string and the action is too high, but it's playable." Adrian was quiet for a moment. She looked at him. "Adrian?" He met her eyes. "Ask me first," she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, would Ethan be open to having access to better resources for his music? Not as a gift from me as an arrangement. I know of several programs in the city that support young musicians who are working outside formal music education. I could make an introduction. The rest would be up to him. Clara looked at him for a long time. "An introduction," she said. Nothing more. She thought about Ethan at the kitchen table saying, "Okay." She thought about the sound of his guitar from the other room, open and warm, the chord progression she didn't have a name for. "Yes," she said. "Ask him. He'll want to make his own decision." "Of course." She looked at the window, the city outside. "You're doing it right," she said. "The asking." "You're doing it right." He looked at her with the expression that had no category, the one that lived somewhere between the near smile and the full one, older and quieter than both. "I have a good teacher," he said. She looked at him. And Clara Bennett, who had spent 4 years being careful and compressed and graceful in the exhausting way that survival required, who had walked into the wrong room on a Tuesday night and stepped between a man and consequences because someone had to, who had sat in a conference room drinking good coffee and told a dangerous man that he was strange and meant it as the highest possible compliment. Clara looked at Adrian Moretti and felt simply and completely like herself. Not the before version, not the after version, not the one built for survival, just herself. Present tense, in this room, right now. "I should finish my floor," she said. "You should." He agreed. He didn't move to make it easier for her to leave. He just sat there exactly as he was making space for her to stay as long as she chose. She chose another 5 minutes. Then she stood up, collected her cart, and walked to the door. At the threshold, she paused. "Adrian?" "Yes. The Delano supply chain. The people who'd be worse off if you just walked away." "Yes." "What kind of people?" A pause. "Families," he said. "People who came to this city with nothing and needed protection from systems that weren't going to give it to them." He paused. "People exactly like the people in the neighborhood I grew up in." Clara held his gaze. "Stay until you can leave without leaving a hole," she said. "I intend to." "And then build something in its place." He looked at her. "That's the plan," he said. She nodded. She pushed her cart down the corridor, and she was nearly at the elevator when she heard him very quietly, not quite loud enough to be certain she was meant to hear it. "Thank you, Clara." She pressed the button. The elevator came. She stepped inside, and this time descending through the quiet building with her cart and her aching hip that was learning slowly to trust itself again. Clara Bennett did not try to put the feeling in words or examine it for flaws or hold it at the careful distance she'd maintained around everything good for 4 years. She just felt it, all the way down. The surgery was scheduled for the second Tuesday in February. Dr. Hansen had been clear about the timeline from the beginning: 6 weeks of preparatory therapy to build the strength and flexibility the surgical site would need, then the procedure, then a recovery period that he estimated at 8 to 12 weeks for the initial phase and 6 months for full rehabilitation. Clara had listened to all of it with the calm attention she brought to things that required her full resources, and she had asked the questions that needed asking about risks, about failure rates, about what happened if the outcome was worse than projected, and Dr. Hansen had answered each one with the careful honesty she'd come to appreciate in him. She had not cried. She had gone home and sat at the kitchen table and made a list. At the top of the list, tell Ethan. She told him that night. He sat across from her and listened with the focused stillness that was entirely his own, now not something he'd absorbed from her, she'd realized, but something that had always been his and had simply found its form over time. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. When? He said. February. 8 weeks. And the odds? Good. Better than good, Dr. Hansen said. The structural damage is significant but clean. No complications that make the outcome uncertain. Will it hurt? He said it quietly, not as a clinical question, as a brother question. Probably, she said. Less than the past 4 years. He looked at the table. He looked at her. Okay, he said. Then, I'm taking time off work for the recovery. Ethan, you don't. I'm taking time off work, he said with a firmness that was entirely new and entirely familiar at the same time. Don't tell me I don't need to. I need to. So I'm going to. She looked at him for a moment. Okay, she said. He nodded. That was all either of them needed. She told Adrian the same night on the phone, sitting on the edge of her bed with the window dark and the apartment quiet. He didn't say anything immediately when she told him. She had learned to wait through his silences. They were always doing something never empty. February, he said. Yes. The second Tuesday. That's what Dr. Hansen scheduled. Another silence. I'll be there, he said. You don't have to, Clara. His voice was quiet and completely certain. I'll be there. She held the phone for a moment. Okay, she said. She was saying okay to a great many things these days. She had noticed this. She had decided it was not weakness. It was the specific kind of strength that came from knowing which things to stop fighting. How are you feeling about it? He said. She thought about it honestly. Scared, she said. But not of the surgery. Scared of wanting it too much. Explain that. If I don't let myself want it, full mobility, real movement, the hip not being the first thing I think about every morning, then if it doesn't work the way we hope, I haven't lost anything I was counting on. She paused. I've been protecting myself from hope for a long time. I know, he said. It's a hard habit to stop. Yes, he said. It is. A brief pause. Clara. Yes. Want it, he said. All of it. The full mobility and the real movement and the mornings without pain. Want it completely. If something goes wrong, which it won't, but if it does, we'll handle that then. Right now, want it. She closed her eyes. That's easy for you to say, she said. No, it isn't, he said quietly. I spent 20 years not wanting anything I couldn't guarantee. I know exactly how easy it isn't. She sat with that for a moment. Want it, she said. Want it, he said. She exhaled. All right, she said. I'll try. The 8 weeks before the surgery were the strangest and the fullest of Clara's adult life. Strange because she was living simultaneously in 2 completely different timelines. The familiar one of night shifts and bus rides and the accumulated ordinary texture of her life, and a new one that was still taking shape, still finding its edges, still surprising her with what it turned out to contain. The new timeline included Adrian in ways that went beyond conference room coffee at midnight. He picked her up from physical therapy twice a week, and they drove through the city afterward, sometimes talking, sometimes not, in the particular companionable silence that had become one of their languages. He came to the apartment for dinner twice, both times at Ethan's invitation, which Clara had not orchestrated, and which moved her more than she'd expected. He and Ethan talked about the city, about music, about the hardware store, about things Clara only half followed because she was too occupied watching the two of them exist in the same room with the ease of people who had decided separately that this was worth making work. The third time Ethan invited Adrian for dinner, she heard them in the kitchen while she was changing a conversation she wasn't meant to hear, kept low and direct. "You're not going to hurt her," Ethan said. Not a question. "No," Adrian said, equally direct. No performance of offense at the implication. "I'm not asking if you plan to. Plans change. I'm asking what happens to you if you do, what it costs you." A silence. "Everything," Adrian said. "It would cost me everything." Another silence. "Okay," Ethan said. "Okay," Adrian said. She had stood in the hallway for a moment after that and done something she hadn't done in a long time. She had pressed the back of her hand against her mouth and let herself feel the full weight of what she was lucky enough to be standing in the middle of. Then she went into the kitchen and asked if someone had started the water for pasta. The new timeline also included, quietly and without announcement, a series of changes in Adrian's operation that she learned about in fragments over those 8 weeks. The Delano arrangement was the first to fully restructure. He told her about it one evening in the car. Matter of fact, the way he reported the weather. 3 of the families involved had been connected to legitimate employment resources. 2 others had been linked to a community legal services organization he'd been funding anonymously for years. The arrangement itself had been dissolved. "How did the people involved respond?" she said. "Mixed," he said. "Some were relieved, some were angry. One man told me I was abandoning people who depended on me." He paused. He wasn't wrong about the abandonment. He was wrong about the solution. "What did you tell him?" "That I wasn't leaving them without options. I was leaving them with better ones." He paused. He didn't believe me. "Does that bother you?" "Yes," he said. "It's appropriate that it does." She looked at him. "What does that mean?" "It means I built something that people depended on in ways they shouldn't have had to depend on me. The discomfort I feel when someone points that out is not something to manage away. It's information." Clara looked at the road ahead. "You've been thinking about this very carefully," she said. "I told you, I have a good teacher." "Stop saying that." "Why?" "Because you're doing the work. I just asked the questions." "Clara." He glanced at her. "You walked through a door. That's not nothing. That's not just asking questions. You walked through a door when every reasonable instinct said turn around, and every single thing that has happened since then started from that." She looked at the road. "We both walked through it," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. "We did." The second Tuesday in February arrived with the particular quality of mornings that contain things you've been moving toward for a long time, not dramatic exactly, but weighted. Present in a way ordinary mornings weren't. Clara had not slept well. This did not surprise her. She had lain awake from 2 until 5 doing a version of the list that was different from her usual list, not cataloging good things to make the dark manageable, but something more like a reckoning. The 4 years behind her. The shape of the person she'd built in that time. What she was carrying into the operating room, and what she was asking the surgeon to give her permission to put down. Ethan drove her. He'd borrowed Danny Cho's car for the morning, and he was quiet behind the wheel, in the way that meant he was using all his available energy to hold his face steady. "Talk to me," she said. "I'm fine." "Ethan." He was quiet for a moment. "I used to lie awake," he said. "When you first came home from the hospital, after the accident, you thought I was asleep. I could hear you at 3 in the morning moving around the kitchen doing the breathing exercises, and I used to lie there thinking..." He stopped. "What?" "That I should do more. That if I was smarter or faster or better at things, I could take more of the weight so you didn't have to." He paused. I know now that wasn't how it worked, but I was 16. Clara looked at him. Ethan. She said his name the way she said it when she needed him to hear her completely. You kept going to school every day. You went to work. You never made me feel like a burden. You never fell apart in front of me, even when I could see how close you were to it. She paused. You think that wasn't doing more? It was everything. He kept his eyes on the road. He took one breath that was slightly unsteady. Okay, he said. She reached over and put her hand on his arm and left it there until they arrived. Adrian was already in the waiting room when they walked in. He stood when he saw them. He looked at Clara first, the full complete attention, and then at Ethan, and he gave Ethan a brief nod that contained something she couldn't fully articulate, but that Ethan received and returned. You didn't have to come early, Clara said. I was here at 7, he said. The surgery's at 9. I know. She looked at him for a moment. You've been in this waiting room for 2 hours. I had calls to make. The waiting room was as good a place as any. Ethan made a sound that was not quite a laugh. Adrian looked at him. She does that too, Ethan said. Makes something practical sound like the reason when the real reason is different. Adrian looked at Clara. Clara looked at the ceiling. I'm surrounded, she said. Yes, Adrian said. You are. She looked at them, her brother who had learned to be steady by watching her, and this man who was learning to be something other than what he'd built by sitting across from her in an empty room, and she understood that surrounded was not the word she'd meant to say. It was not the right word at all. The right word was held. She was held. She had not been held in 4 years, possibly longer. She sat down between them in the waiting room of Midwest orthopedic specialists on the second Tuesday in February and let herself be held. It was the bravest thing she had done since walking through a conference room door. Dr. Hansen spoke to Ethan and Adrian together after the surgery. Clara learned this afterward, that they had waited together for 3 hours and 40 minutes, and that at some point during the second hour, Ethan had said something that made Adrian laugh, actually laugh, and that Ethan had looked so startled by the sound that he'd almost dropped his phone. She learned it from Ethan, who told her 3 days into her recovery with the precise detail of someone who had been paying very close attention. What did you say to him? She asked. I told him that the hardware store has a better selection of organizational tools than most people realize, and that if he ever needed to organize anything, he should come see us. Ethan paused. I don't know why that was funny. It just was. Clara looked at her brother from her position on the bed, propped on the specific arrangement of pillows that Grace had diagrammed for her pre-surgery, and felt something warm and uncomplicated move through her chest. You made Adrian Moretti laugh in a surgical waiting room, she said. Apparently. Ethan. What? You're remarkable. He looked at the ceiling. He was doing the thing where he was trying not to show how much that mattered. Go to sleep, he said. Dr. Hansen said you need rest. I've been resting for 3 days. Then rest more. He stood up. At the door he paused. Clara. Yes. Dr. Hansen said everything went exactly as planned. Better than planned. He said it carefully, precisely making sure she got every word. Better than planned. She held that. I know, she said. He told me. I just wanted to say it again. She looked at her brother. Thank you, she said. He nodded. He went to the other room. She heard after a moment his guitar. She closed her eyes. She slept. Adrian came every day during the first 2 weeks of recovery. Not for long, he was cognizant of her energy, her need for sleep, the specific demands of healing that required quiet more than company. He came for an hour, sometimes less. He brought food that was better than anything she would have asked for, and didn't comment when she only ate half. He sat in the chair beside her bed and talked about what was happening in the world outside. Not the world of his operation, but the actual world, the ordinary world. things he'd read or observed or thought about. One afternoon he came in and didn't talk at all. He just sat and she slept, and when she woke up, he was still there reading something on his phone, with his jacket over the arm of the chair, looking as relaxed as she'd ever seen him. "How long have I been asleep?" she said. He looked up. "About 90 minutes. You stayed. You seemed like you needed the rest." She looked at him. "You stayed for 90 minutes while I slept." "Yes." "Why didn't you leave?" He looked at her for a moment. "Because I didn't want to," he said. "It's restful. Watching me sleep is restful. Being somewhere with you is restful," he said. "Whether you're sleeping or talking or arguing with me or staring at the ceiling, it's consistently the most restful place I am." Clara held that for a moment. "That might be the most honest thing you've ever said to me," she said. "I've said some very honest things to you." "I know. This one is different." He looked at her. "How?" he said. "Because it's not about anything we need to decide or resolve or navigate. It's just true, for its own sake." She paused. "That's the hardest kind of true." He was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. "It is." She looked at him. "Adrian." "Yes. I'm going to be able to walk without the limp," she said. "Dr. Hansen thinks by the end of the full rehabilitation, the compensation pattern will be fully corrected. I'll always have some awareness of the joint. There's permanent nerve involvement that won't change. But the mobility, the pain levels, the way I move through the world." She stopped. "Clara, it's going to be different," she said. "Significantly different." She paused. "I've been thinking about what that means. Who I am when the physical compensation isn't part of every single day. And I think she's the same person," she said. "I think I'm still me, just not bracing." He looked at her with the expression that had no category. "You told Grace that," he said, "about not bracing. She told me that. I've been thinking about it since." She looked at her hands. "The person I was before the accident, I can't go back to her. She's not there anymore. But I think the person I'm becoming is more fully myself than either of them." She paused. "Does that make sense?" "More than you know," he said quietly. She looked at him. "Tell me what it's like on your end," she said. "The changes. How does it feel from the inside?" He was quiet for a moment. The particular thinking quiet. "Uncomfortable," he said. "In the way that necessary things are uncomfortable." He turned the cup he was holding. Even here, even in her bedroom, he'd brought coffee. "There are days when the system I built pushes back. People who've been part of it for a long time don't always understand what I'm moving toward. Some of them think I've been compromised, that you've weakened me." "What do you tell them?" "Nothing," he said. "I let the results speak." He paused. "But there are harder days when I ask myself if they're right. Not about the weakness, that's not what concerns me. Whether the change I'm making is real, or whether it's a story I'm telling myself, because I want it to be true." "How do you answer that?" she said. "I think about the conversation I had with the man who told me I was abandoning people who depended on me," he said. "About how uncomfortable that made me. About the fact that I didn't try to convince him he was wrong. I just tried to make sure he ended up with better options." He paused. "A story I was telling myself would have needed him to validate it. The real thing just needed to be true, whether he believed it or not." Clara looked at him. "That's the compass," she said. "Yes," he said. "That's the compass." She held his gaze. "Adrian," she said. "Yes." "You're different from the man who was in that conference room in November." "I know. Not entirely different. The core is the same. But the direction is different," he said. "Yes." She paused. "How does that feel?" He looked at her for a moment. "Like I've been walking somewhere for 20 years, he said. "And I finally looked up and recognized where I am." He paused. "Not where I intended to be, but somewhere I can work from." "Somewhere you can work from," she repeated. With the right compass, he said. He looked at her. And the right company. Clara looked at him. Her chest felt full in a way that no longer frightened her. She reached out and put her hand over his. He turned his hand over and held hers. They sat like that in the quiet of the afternoon, in her ordinary apartment, with Ethan's music a soft presence from the other room, and the city moving outside the window, and nothing between them needed to be named right now, because it had already become what it was going to be. 6 months after the surgery, Clara walked into the Harrington Tower for the last time as a cleaning employee. She had given Dolores 4 weeks' notice, which was 2 more than required. Dolores had received the news with the particular expression of someone who had always suspected this arrangement was temporary and was glad to have been right. "You're going to be fine, honey," Dolores said. "I know," Clara said, and she meant it. What came next had taken shape slowly, the way real things took shape, not from a single decision, but from the accumulation of smaller ones. Dr. Hansen's referral to a colleague's doing research on long-term outcomes in spinal injury rehabilitation. A conversation with that colleague about the gap between what was currently offered to patients in the first year post-injury and what was actually needed. Clara's 4 years of navigating that gap from the inside and the very particular knowledge she'd accumulated about what helped and what didn't. A suggestion from Grace Park, who had watched Clara move through her rehabilitation with the combination of stubbornness and clear-eyed practicality that she said she'd never seen in a patient before, that this knowledge was worth something. "You understand what patients go through in a way that takes most advocates years to develop," Grace had said. "You've lived it. That's not nothing. That's actually very rare." Clara had thought about it for 3 weeks before she told Adrian. He listened without interrupting, which was his way. When she finished, he said, "Patient advocacy, specifically around injury rehabilitation. The gap between what insurance covers and what patients actually need. How to navigate the system from inside it." She paused. "I know that system extremely well." "Yes," he said. "You do. There's a training program at Northwestern. It's 18 months. At the end, you're a certified patient advocate with specialization in rehabilitation services." She paused. "It's not free." "Clara, I'm going to apply for the scholarship," she said. "There are 2 available. I have a strong application. Grace is writing a letter of support, and Dr. Hansen has offered to write one as well." He was quiet for a moment. "And if you don't get the scholarship," he said carefully, "then I'll find another way." She paused. "I am telling you this because you're part of my life, and you should know what I'm planning. I'm not telling you because I need you to solve it." A brief silence. "I know," he said. "Good. Clara." "Yes." "You're going to get the scholarship," he said. It was not flattery. It was the precise tone he used when he'd done a calculation and was confident in the result. She looked at him. "I think so too," she said. She got it. The letter came on a Thursday morning in April, and she was standing in the kitchen reading it when Ethan came in from his shift, and she looked up, and he saw her face and said, "You got it," before she'd said a single word. And then they were both standing in the kitchen in the ridiculous way that people stand when something they've been working toward for a long time finally arrives, not quite knowing what to do with their hands. She called Adrian from the kitchen while Ethan made coffee. He answered on the first ring. "I got it," she said. A brief silence. "I know," he said. "How do you know I just opened the letter?" "Because you called me from your kitchen at 8:15 in the morning," he said. "Which means something happened that you needed to tell me immediately, and the only immediate thing we've both been waiting for is the scholarship." A pause. "Also, you sound like yourself, which is how you sound when something goes right." Clara looked at Ethan, who was listening to this entire conversation with the expression of someone trying not to smile. "I sound like myself," she repeated. "You have a particular quality when something is good," Adrian said. "It's distinct from your other qualities." "What does it sound like?" "Like you've stopped bracing," he said. She held the phone. Ethan looked at her. She put her hand over her mouth for just a moment. Then she took it away. "I'll see you tonight," she said. "Yes," he said. "Tonight." So, that last night in the Harrington Tower, Clara cleaned the 14th floor alone. Her movement was different now. Fully different. The compensating lean was gone, corrected by 6 months of rehabilitation and the surgical work that had given her right side back the mechanics it needed to carry its own weight. She moved down the corridor with the even stride of someone who trusted her body to do what she asked of it, and the trust was still new enough that she was aware of it, conscious of what it meant to move without waiting for the punishment. She cleaned the offices she'd been cleaning for 2 years. She cleaned the break room and the bathrooms. She came at the end of the floor to the conference room at the end of the east corridor. She pushed the door open. The room was empty tonight. Just the long table, the leather chairs, the window with the city outside. She stood in the doorway for a moment. She thought about a Tuesday night in November, when she'd stood in this same doorway and heard the sound of someone afraid and chosen to walk through it. She thought about the silence that had followed her voice. About the question, "Do you know who I am?" and the answer, "Yes," and then the question that changed the shape of everything, "Then why are you still standing there?" Because someone had to. She walked into the room. She stood at the window. The city below was lit and vast and ongoing. The same city, it had always been enormous and indifferent and full of the lives of people doing the invisible necessary work of surviving it. She could see the block where she caught the bus. She could see, if she looked north and slightly west, the approximate neighborhood of her apartment. Her kitchen. The pull-out couch where Ethan had slept for years, and which was going to become in 2 months when he started his music program in earnest. A proper bed in a proper room, because some things that had been deferred long enough were finally allowed to simply be. She heard the door behind her. She didn't turn around. Adrian came to stand beside her at the window. They stood there for a moment looking at the city. "Last night," he said. "Last night," she said. "How does it feel?" She thought about it. "Strange," she said. "Not sad. Strange the way the end of something necessary feels. You're glad it's over, and you're also aware that it was real while it was happening." "What was real about it?" he said. "All of it," she said. "The work, the exhaustion, the coffee, you." He was quiet for a moment. "Clara," he said. "Yes. I want to ask you something." She turned to look at him. He was looking at the city, and then he turned to look at her, and the expression on his face was the one she loved most. Not the controlled one, not the powerful one, but the one that was simply him. Present, undefended. Doing the thing she'd watched him learn to do over 6 months of Tuesday nights, and afternoon drives and dinners at her kitchen table, and 90 minutes in a chair beside her bed. The thing where he let himself be seen. "Ask," she said. "Stay," he said. "Not in this building. Not in this arrangement. In my life. All the way in." He held her gaze. "I'm not offering you safety, because I know you don't need me for that. I'm not offering you comfort because you've built that yourself. I'm offering you me, the Compass version. The one that's still being built." He paused. "I'm asking you to be the person I come home to, if you want that." Clara looked at him. The city moved below them. She thought about every reasonable thing she could say about timing and complexity, and the long road that was still ahead of both of them. She thought about the 4 years she'd spent being careful and practical and protected against hope. She thought about Grace Park's voice saying once the body starts trusting again, the work accelerates, and about what that meant in every context that mattered. She thought about Ethan saying he looks at you like you're the first real thing he's seen in a very long time. She thought about standing on a sidewalk at 4 in the morning saying, "Come get me," and hearing, "I'm already on my way." She thought about a woman who had walked into the wrong room on a Tuesday night in November, because someone had to, and everything, every extraordinary, ordinary, difficult, true thing that had walked through that door with her. "Yes," she said. She said it the same way she'd said it the night he asked her to let him see her differently. Clean. Direct. No surrounding framework, no careful qualification. Just yes, complete and certain, the word she used when she'd stopped pretending she didn't know the answer. He looked at her. And then he did something she hadn't seen him do before. He reached out and tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear very gently, with the careful attention of someone who understood exactly how rare it was to be allowed to touch something that mattered. "Yes," she said again, softer this time, just to say it twice. He held her face in his hands. She held his gaze without flinching. And in the conference room where Clara Bennett had once stood trembling with her cleaning cart and changed the direction of everything, they stayed exactly as they were. Two people who had walked through the same door from opposite sides, who had spent 6 months finding each other's compass bearings, who had learned in the most unlikely classroom, in the most unlikely way, that strength without humanity was nothing, and that humanity without strength was only half the story. The city moved below them, enormous and indifferent and full of lives, theirs among them. Years later, when people asked Clara how she changed Adrian Moretti, she always gave the same answer. She said, "I didn't change him." She said, "He already knew who he wanted to be. He'd just been using his past as a justification instead of a compass. And sometimes, all a person needs is someone willing to ask the right question at the right time in the right empty room." And when people asked Adrian what had changed him, he was quieter about it, the way he was quieter about things that mattered most. But if you asked him on the right day, in the right company, he would tell you about a Tuesday night in November, and a woman with a cleaning cart who stepped between him and everything he'd been for 20 years, and said because someone had to, and meant it, and didn't ask for anything in return. He would tell you that the most dangerous thing that ever happened to him was not a rival or a threat, or the weight of everything he'd built. The most dangerous thing that ever happened to him was a woman who walked through the wrong door and refused to look away. And he would tell you with the quiet certainty of a man who had learned the difference between controlling something and protecting it, that it was the best thing that had ever happened to him, without exception, without qualification, and without a single moment of doubt. Clara Bennett had not needed to be saved. She had needed to be seen. And in seeing her fully and without flinching, Adrian Moretti had finally, after 20 years, and a life built from anger and necessity, and the long mistake of confusing power with purpose, seen himself. That was the whole story. That was exactly enough.